Hello and welcome everybody to this episode 27 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast, a Warhammer 40,000 podcast made, developed, delivered and or produced. I forget the order in which I say those things. Normally it flows so naturally, but today not so much because it is the age of the Space Marine, everybody, and my crafty elder ways are under threat, and thus, as such, my, seemingly beautiful introduction has fallen foul of Space Marine nonsense. But, joining me in the celebration of this glorious era of the Space Marine is none other than Philip. How you doing, Phil?
I'm good, thanks. Don't think you ever called me Philip before. I think that's a new one.
It is a new one, yeah, no, absolutely. I just like to try and mix it up a little bit here. Sometimes I think when I was waiting for you to join the call, I was remarking that, or rather I was calling you Phyllis, which I thought was also quite nice, but...
no thanks.
No, more of a Philip than a Phyllis.
Yeah, I think so.
No, that makes sense. That's absolutely fine. What have you been doing with yourself then, Phil? What's going on in your world?
I have been painting furiously for the last week in preparation for GT Heat.
You, me, and everybody else, by all accounts. Not least Joe, I imagine. I mean, Joe, has that been your scenario as well, or have you been well-behaved? In fact, I know the answer. You've been well-behaved, haven't you?
I've been well-behaved. My tournament army has been painted for the last, 4 weeks. So,
he's already on to the next project.
I am.
It's madness.
In fact, I had a project, and then I skipped on to the next one after that.
Crikey. What was the project between the project that you're on?
Well, it was going to be Chaos Knights. They're just sat in boxes doing nothing at the moment.
I see.
But,
what could you possibly be doing then, if not Chaos Knights?
Well, it's obviously Space Marines.
Oh my god. Yeah, this Phil. He's chasing the old hobby nonsense.
Getting on that meta bandwagon.
I seem to remember when Chaos Space Marines came out, he was all about them Chaos Space Marines. Then he was all about those Chaos Knights, and now seemingly he's all about those regular Space Marines. Madness, really, isn't it?
I don't have the staying power for Chaos, then, clearly. That's my problem.
I mean, we're not going to get into this in any great length during the course of the podcast. We might as well address it now. What's the deal with that, man? Like, literally, how did no one in Games Workshop know or think to affect any kind of meaningful changes to Chaos Space Marines on the verge of the release of regular Space Marines? Like, I get it, they didn't want to spoil all the cool stuff for the poster boys, and it's all business. But why do a whole new Chaos Space Marine book months ahead of the essentially definitive Space Marine book with a whole heap of new rules and not incorporate any of that in? Any thoughts or feelings? What do you reckon that's all about?
I get the feeling the Chaos book probably got done way before the Space Marine one. So, and they've hinted at that before, like Frontline Gaming mentioned it, that the order in which the books get released isn't often the order in which they were created. So it could be the Chaos one was done and dusted with Vigilus, effectively, and that could have been a year before they even looked at the Space Marine one, but then the release schedule means they just got released almost back to back. Which, it might not be the case, but something similar to that could be possible.
I mean, I feel for the Chaos players because, they've enjoyed, obviously, a wonderful couple months or a few months where all their stuff's been getting frequent releases and it's all been pretty amazing and lots of cool stuff's happening. Chaos Knights are great, so on and so forth. And just as they're sort of getting used to this, they're thinking, ooh, we're enjoying a little moment in the sun. Games Workshop comes along and goes, no, you won't. Here are Space Marines. So, yeah, aren't they nice?
Well, I have a theory on this.
Of course you do. Let's hear it.
Mighty theory is that Space Marines are primarily designed to function alone. So that's why their codex is mega hench and mega beefy. And they've got all these cool new toys. Whereas Chaos is primarily like a synergy army. So you need Codex Space Marines, Codex Chaos Space Marines, Chaos Knights, and Chaos Demons. And when you have all three of those working together, then that's when it's most powerful. Because people forget that Chaos Space Marines, they're not just at war in normal space, is that they're at war inside the Eye of Terror together. They're like a scavenger army. They're never going to have as good, up-to-date, clean, new stuff as normal Space Marines. I think people kind of forget that, and they're like, oh, all their stuff's crap. But then they've just been given the Lord Discordant, who is terrifying.
It is true. He is rather tasty, the old Lord Discordant.
And like the new Chaos Celeste Demon stuff is amazing.
True.
And I bet you, if you put 3 Chaos Renegade Knights, all with double Gatling cannons, in front of a Primaris army, my money is on those 3 Chaos Knights, because they will rinse through a Space Marine army in no time.
Thank you for that, Phil.
Oh, sorry. I thought I'd muted myself, but I clearly tapped it twice as I was doing it.
It's quite all right, buddy. No one judges you. But what else has been going on with you, though, Joe? What have you been doing outside of, obviously, moving on to the second project? What's been going down?
No, much. Just work and more work. I had a little holiday recently. Well, I say a holiday. I just had a week off and went to Exmoor to see the parents with my daughter. Exmoor, as you all know, is basically the upside down. Nothing happens there. It's a dead zone in the universe. But there is a Butlins there, which keeps children happy.
There you go.
Yeah.
And somewhere amongst the nothing, your parents' abode.
Yes, but that's in the middle of nowhere, where like mobile phone signal and internet is nothing but a mystery.
I mean, that explains so much about you, Joe, really.
I know, everything around there, they're still working on horse and carts at the moment.
I have to admit, Joe, this is one of those moments where not actually having taken the time to kind of discuss what I kind of was hoping you would talk about comes into effect. You know, this is one of those times where the apparent lack of show notes really kind of, comes through. But what I was hoping you were going to say was you played in a 40k Brawl tournament a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah, that was the thing. We played in 2 tournaments since we did it. Yeah, ignore everything else, that my social life and the fact that I have a family.
Yeah.
Mate.
So obviously we played in a 40k Brawl tournament. Myself, Joe, and Rich, who isn't here sadly because of life-related work issues. The man cannot seem to get away from his desk today. But nonetheless, yeah, we went to that event. And how did you perform at that tournament, Joe?
I went 2-1. I lost my first game to the cheese that is the Eldar Flyer Wave Serpent army of death. And we played long ways, and I just couldn't do anything. Wave Serpents did the usual, I'm not going to die, and shoot you with lots of shuriken cannons, and that wasn't very good. But game 2, I played against Adam Shepherd-Jones, the man we had on this podcast not long ago. I played him with his knights, and I beat him. It was easy. It's weak. And then I played against his brother, Simon, who was running Genestealer Cult. And I beat him too. Good old family bashing.
And how did these 2, victories and a loss, affect your overall rating?
I think in the end it got me 6th. Yeah, there was a weird mix-up near the end where Best Coast had a bit of a brain fart, and everyone's scores got mixed up, but Adam managed to fix it in the end. And that's where I finally placed.
Well done, mate.
How did you do?
Well, exactly. This is the point where, regular listeners will expect me to kind of chime in and talk about how I won the whole thing or did much better than you did. But that isn't true, actually. So I won game 1 against a very nice fella who wasn't running a particularly horrendous list. So if I'm honest, and this sounds a bit mad, but if I'm honest, I didn't really optimize my output in that first game because Adam came up to me and said, "Damn, mate, don't be just give the guy a game at least," because the expectation was looking at the army lists as I played it by, to the letter, it would have been a very easy kicking, but I decided to kind of fling everything forwards and just was like, yeah, all right, cool, I'll give him a chance, or just try and make a game out of it, which sounds really horrible when you say it out loud, because it sounds like it's some sort of like pity scenario, but again, Adam was sort of adamant, there you are, look at that pun, that I not, completely and utterly dismantle this guy, game one.
You've got to think that, like, that how the first game in a tournament for your opponent doesn't just reflect on you, it reflects on the event as well. So if this guy turns up and he's all fun and jolly and he comes up his first opponent and it's an absolute mad Eldar list and he gets smashed in the face over in literally half an hour and he's got to spend the next hour and 40 minutes plus lunchtime doing nothing, it's a bit of a washout day for him.
No, absolutely.
So if you can give him an hour and a half of rolling dice and having a good time and a laugh, ultimately he'll lose, but it will be a good day for him, and his money is well spent.
I mean, we actually had what I would call a pretty lovely game, because by the end of it, he was just like, "Oh, it's a bloodbath," and it was like, and it was, to be fair, because I kept running towards all his dreadnoughts and letting stuff die, all the while, cheekily in the background holding down all the objectives that mattered and still kind of ticking over the victory points to get the overall win, but was just like, yeah, sure, go for it. But the thing is having completely forgot that we weren't just logging wins for overall victory, I probably gave up some victory points in that game that could have helped me later on. But, just whatever. It went well. And then game 2, I played against the guy who beat Joe in game 1. So I played against the Elder Flyer list with my own Elder Flyer list, essentially. Mine is slightly different from the conventional ones, essentially where they use Wave Serpents, I spam Hornets, which is my weird secret sauce that I was trying not to tell anyone about before the GT. But now I'm happy to do so, because theoretically the earliest you'll be listening to this is about an hour before the first game of the GT starts, so I doubt anyone out there will be ripping off my Hornet list anytime soon, but hopefully after the course of this weekend maybe they will, but we'll see. But yeah, as I discovered, it very comfortably beats the Wave Serpent Flyer army if used correctly. And that is a grueling match, though, because the guy who plays that flyer list that Joe lost to, very good player, very competent with the list, very comfortable with it, very on point with all the different rules, and yeah, he didn't make it easy. I mean, I can imagine you probably found that as well, right, Joe, playing him in game 1?
Oh God, it was an absolute nightmare. Not because he's a bad person; he's a lovely person. Just because he knows his army incredibly well, but he also knows everybody else's armies incredibly well. And it's clear that he's played with that army for a long time as well. He knows how to get the most out of everything. Yeah,
no, he's a very, very good player. But I managed to win that one. It was a close drawn thing, but I did win it. And then in game 3, I came up against a younger lad. I say younger, he's probably in his early 20s, maybe late teens, I don't know, but somewhere between 19 and 21. He probably looks younger than he actually is. And he was using Mechanicum stuff. And although I probably wouldn't have lost the game in an internal war setting, there was obviously the Maelstrom element, and I just fell behind the pace. I didn't make the right decisions. I fell behind the pace and I just couldn't catch up. So at the end of the game, even though not very much of my army, well, all my flyers were dead, but all the stuff that mattered was still alive, still trying to plug away at it. But yeah, it just turned into one of those games where, yeah, the Mechanicus these days, I mean, I think a lot of people have obviously been sleeping on those for a while, because Mechanicus are really coming along, I think. They're scary boys, the Mechanicus.
Oh God, they're well tooled to deal with, like, most armies in the game. They've got all the extra, like, +2 to hit for their tanks and vehicles. It's a massive bonus when it comes to dealing with Eldar flyers, especially on, like, a unit of 6 chicken walkers that's putting out 12, like, las cannon shots, hitting you 2-3 rolling ones. wounding you on threes. It's a bad day for an Eldar flyer when
Oh,
that
gotcha.
comes around.
Also, as well, I mean, even if you're using the autocannon variant as well, that's still pretty...
Oh, that's horrific. Because, like, yeah, it hasn't got the -3, but it's still doing 2 damage a pop.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's really tough work. And credit where credit's due to the guy. His army was a bunch of Catachan, guardsmen, big unit of Bolgrins, loads of those walkers, those chicken walker things from Mechanicus, a few hellhounds, other bits and pieces. Just a really scary, high-pressure army that just sort of runs at you, while in the back these things just keep shooting you. And they're -1 to hit natively, plus the -1s for being Stygies, and then a bunch of other stuff. And you're like, oosh! It's like playing against an Elder army. That's well terrifying. Yeah. So yeah, anyway, that was tournament stuff. So at the end of it, after having won 2, lost 1, same as Joe, I posted a 9th place finish because that last game was grueling and I massively fell behind in overall points. Meaning that I did my usual thing, won the first game comfortably, moved up to table 1, stayed on table 1 for the second game, then stayed there for table 2 for game 3. It was like, yeah, and basically it was that thing of whoever wins this will probably win. But yeah, that wasn't me on that occasion. So how it goes, isn't it? How it goes.
Yeah, but the weekend before that, we played another event called Farmageddon.
Oh yeah, but we talked about that in the last podcast, Joe.
We talked about that we were going to it. We didn't talk that we actually. Like, what happened there, did we?
We did, Joe, yeah. This is what happens when you actually don't listen to this podcast at all.
Well, I'm here when it's recorded. So...
Yeah, but clearly you're not, because you remember otherwise.
Alright then, I'll let you off.
You gleefully spoke about how you won all 3 games, and then I kind of shot you down by going, yeah, but who won, Joe? Who won? Ooh.
We were all a winner in our hearts. The game was a winner. The hobby wasn't a winner because your army wasn't painted, but...
No, not at that time. It looks quite nice now, though.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see.
It's come a long way, Joe.
You can do a lot with a smartphone camera and filters.
That is true. You can.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, let's talk about what we're going to talk about on the show. So we're trying to make this a relatively quick one, mainly because... we're all up to our eyeballs in Grand Tournament Heat-Free stuff. We're going to be travelling up to Warhammer World on Friday. So yesterday, by the virtues of... Again, this is where this stuff sort of gets confusing. But yesterday, we were at Warhammer World, i.e. Friday, because we went up there and we did some practice and we played some games and we had a fun time. And today, we're at the tournament. So again, it's a big part of the timeline. So it's kind of mucked up a few things in terms of how we normally produce and edit and record this stuff. So we're going to try and keep it relatively short. But then Games Workshop was super nice, and they released probably one of the biggest codexes or did one of the biggest releases of recent memory, that being a sexy new Space Marine release. And it wouldn't be a attempt at staying current if we didn't at least attempt to talk about Space Marines. Joe has the book, right, Joe?
I do. I read it on the toilet when I got home from work, and that is my research.
Amazing.
And I did some I listened to everyone else's because everyone else does a review, so I learned from other people.
It's probably worth saying that if you want a comprehensive review of the Space Marine book, maybe listen to someone else. But if you'd like to hear our ill-informed opinions of the things we heard and what Joe read while he was on the toilet, then stick around. It'll be a hoot. And then we'll close out with Phil talking to us about his Grand Tournament Heat 2 army list. We're excited because Phil almost at one point tried being competitive, but then in the end went, I'll just go back to doing an Inquisitor. Isn't that right, Phil?
Pretty much. I mean, you keep trying to sell me on these worms, but I'm not buying it, basically.
You've got to get a worm, mate. Little pet worm.
Got worms?
Exactly. Joe's got worms.
Do I?
Didn't you just say you got worms?
Dan's got worms.
Oh, I've got worms. Sorry.
As if to imply that you've got some kind of intestinal insect.
I mean, honestly, at this point in time, I'd be very grateful for an intestinal insect because it might help my weight. I mean, that might be nice. Maybe a good few months of having a worm would set me right.
We can get one. I'm sure that the dark web.
You get it wrong. You get some sort of parasite that would eat my brain or something.
Ugh.
I know. Could you imagine that? Oh, don't worry, Dan. I'll put this worm in you. Oh God, his brain's been consumed from the inside out.
It's like something out of Wrath of Khan.
Could well be. Could very well be. But yeah, we're going to talk about Phil's Army. But yeah, we'll start out by talking about Space Marines, then we'll talk about Phil's Army. Relatively short episode by our standards anyway, but yeah, hopefully you enjoy. Follow us on social media. Rich isn't here, unfortunately, so all that talk of community content and feedback and things will resume in the next episode when we're able to do so, because we kind of figured you would enjoy just having something rather than, something slightly less than what we want to be delivering on a long-term basis versus nothing at all. So here it is. This is what we came up with. We hope you enjoy. Transitional noise. Woo!
Oh, I've dropped my paintbrush. Oh, it's gone mad.
I mean, this is an incredible start to the segment here, Joe.
Yeah.
Are you back in a happy place?
I'm back in a semi-regular emotional state.
Brilliant. All right, I will begin the segment then.
You should have started. You should have kept in the me shouting and screaming.
Yeah, maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I suppose. Well, someone will find out. You won't, because you never listen to our podcast. I've discovered this is hurtful to me.
You're so emotional about this.
Well, I am a little bit. I kind of figured that you would at least check to see what we were talking about, or like just sort of make sure that you're happy with how you're being portrayed.
Yeah, but I trust you, Dan.
Well, there you go. That's your first mistake. No, you're right.
Am I going to find out that I've not actually been put into any of the podcast?
Exactly. All the people at your work, when you talk about it, like, oh, I'm going to talk about this on the podcast, and they're like, is he all right? Like, he seems to think he's doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Madness. Anyway, right, let's talk about these Space Marines. So, as those of you who listen to the intro will know, we're going to start by talking about Space Marines. But how are we going to talk about Space Marines? Because all the people on the internet have already kind of said everything you want to hear about Space Marines. But, we like to believe that you kind of want to get our opinions on things because you like our original, exciting, unique take on all things 40k. Either that, or you really, really don't like when we talk about these sort of things and you're just listening to us have some kind of weird, twisted vengeance. Maybe you're one of Joe's many jilted lovers looking for revenge.
Looking for revenge in fake listening numbers.
Exactly. Take that, Joe. I'm gonna make you famous yet. Anyway, we are going to talk about, first and foremost, some of the models that have been showcased, released. I mean, admittedly, as of today, only a couple of the new Space Marine models have actually been released. So that's the new Khan and the new Tigerius. But these are models that will be released soon or have already been released. But we're just going to pick one each because, again, it gets a little bit too laborious if we start going through absolutely everything. It's very difficult when you start talking about something that is sort of visual while not having any visuals. So yeah, we'll try and make this as painless as possible. So in the best attempt possible to achieve this, we'll start with Joe's opinion on things. Joe, which of the many new Space Marine Phobos Primaris thingamabibs did you want to highlight and or discuss?
I am a massive fan of the new Dreadnought.
I don't believe there is a new Dreadnought, is there?
Yeah, there is. It's got a little baby cage on it. And it's got the flamer and the punchy fist.
Yeah, no, I'm not under the impression. I mean, Phil, is that a Dreadnought?
No, it's was it a Walker or a Warsuit?
It's a Warsuit, Joe. You dithering fool.
It's the Invicta Tactical Warsuit.
Indeed, it's the very same.
But they do explain on the community website that Belisarius Crawl basically takes a Redemptor Dreadnought and strips it down to become the lightweight Walker suit. So it kind of makes sense. It was a Dreadnought at one point.
Oh, really? That's how these things come to be?
Yeah.
So he kind of pimped my rided his own vehicle. So he's like the new Tim Westwood, isn't he? Basically.
Is nothing sacred to Belisarius Cole? I mean, like, it literally...
I think that's his point, though, that nothing is. He's a tech heretic.
Well, clearly. I mean, literally. What did he do with the sarcophagus?
You chuck that out.
It's just chuck out nuts to that.
Don't need it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he didn't take a used one with someone actually in it.
You know, so I don't want that vegetable. Just threw it in a skip.
Yeah.
Put him in a jar. He won't know any difference.
Was it like that scene in RoboCop 2 where he'd been torn apart by the gangsters and he was just there on the floor going, gang, gang? I appreciate that doesn't make much sense if you don't understand the plot of RoboCop 2. There's a scene, he gets ripped apart and he gets thrown at some police officers and he's like gyrating on the floor in agony. It was really, really quite disturbing when I was a child, but these days I find it very entertaining.
Yeah. I think it is blatantly stolen from the second Matrix. Is it the second Matrix movie or the third one?
The second and third one had them both in.
It could also be taken from the movie Avatar.
Yeah, or if you watched it and you're a fan of Starship Troopers, there was the Starship Troopers. Was it Marauder film? They made the CGI one, and they had that cartoon series as well back in the day.
Or, as most people are saying, Aliens. I think that's probably the most prominent comparison.
Nah, because the Aliens thing is the Sentinel.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, you can't have two Aliens things in there.
Maybe they stole it from the Grey Knights.
Oh yes, the old
They've already
Nemesis
got one.
Dread Knight has reared its head again.
Oh, at least someone's having fun in it. Grey Knight players aren't.
You don't know, maybe they'll get one of these before too long.
Yeah, that would be hilarious, wouldn't it? They'll be like, get rid of your usual tech, get rid of your Terminators, you've got normal Space Marine stuff now, and your Sergeant might be a Psyker.
Boom. There you go.
So,
So what is it about the Invicta tactical warsuit that fills you with glee or dismay, Joe?
oh, I love it. I think it looks amazing. And it has the coolest thing ever, which is a side-holstered heavy bolter, which everyone needs to know and love.
It has to be said as well. I mean, you know, it shows a great deal of adaptability within a Dreadnought close combat weapon. Because, you know, previously I always liked the idea of a Power Fist as being this really cumbersome, stupid weapon that could only really exist in a universe like 40k where, you know, they would just be like, yeah, that's cool, I've just got a gigantic hand and it's just set to destroy all the time. So literally I touch anything and it's just, BAM! Dead!
I always found that, like, the phrase Dreadnought, like, the Power Fist was just a bit odd. Because at the end of the day, it's just a massive rotating club. Like, it doesn't really pick up or do anything.
Except this one does, doesn't it?
This one, it's like a fully functioning hand.
Do you
And
think
I
it
love
has
it.
to power down the power element of the Power Fist in order to grasp the heavy bolter?
I hope not. I hope it's able to, like, backhanded, like, pimp slap people with the heavy bolter.
Maybe that should supercharge the heavy bolter so the bolts are now strength 10 because it's double the strength of the weapon or something.
Yeah, although I'm quite sad that it didn't get, like, the similar rule to, is it, who's the Forge World Dreadnought character?
Oh, the Red Scorpion guy.
Yeah, because he's got an assault cannon, like, attached to his hand, which he shoots people with. So, no, I'm happy with this one. I give it about a week before someone has converted one to have two fists to be running sideways, shooting two heavy bolters.
Are you going to be doing that, Joe?
Gunslinger.
I kind of feel like I have to now. I'm going to copyright TM that
Yeah.
right now. Yeah.
I mean, it does already quite prominently feature multiple guns, right? I mean, do you really need to give it, you know, grasping two heavy bolters when you could just have it using the whatever that, you know, heavy stubber is?
I want two, and I want to bad boys it and have them, like, going back to back, like, with, like, helicopters flying over.
Well, now that is just a scene out of The Matrix.
It sounds like everyone's stealing everyone else's ideas right now, but
That's it, mate.
well,
It's the end times. We've run out of ideas.
what you could do is have, like, him, and then, like in The Matrix, have a little guy, a little dude with a trolley, just covered in heavy bolters, and he just, like, picks one up and shoots it, and then throws it away, and then picks up another one. He doesn't need to reload. Also, I like about it, it infiltrates as well, which is hilarious. Because why would you ever take any other dreadnought? Because this thing deploys 9 inches away, and it's got a 10-inch movement. So it will literally be like inside you, turn 1. And that's it. And then it's got it's got a heavy flamer that fires 2d6 shots. And if it's obviously the first turn is the Devastator Doctrine turn, it's got a -2 AP heavy flamer, which is hilarious.
That's pretty funny, isn't it? The thing I wanted to ask in terms of the points and so on, because this was one of the things we observed while you were reading the book on the toilet. Not that I was watching Joe on the toilet or communing with him during this process. This occurred after the toilet session had concluded. What he had done there is his business and so on. Anyway, the point is, we had the conversation about the points cost. So this guy is 90 points base, whereas a Redemptor Dreadnought is actually 15 points more, but yet is, by all accounts, worse. Is that correct, Joe?
That is correct, because for that 15 points for the Redemptor Dreadnought, you get 1 additional toughness, because the Invictor is toughness 6, whereas the Redemptor is toughness 7, and that's it. But that is the only thing it gets. But the Redemptor loses infiltrate, which I think is mad, because
it only has movement 8, right?
And it only has movement 8, whereas this one is movement 10. So I think in the world of gaming as it is at the moment, like, really for what you get and what you lose and what you gain kind of thing, they should realistically be the same points, right?
I mean, theoretically. I mean, if anything, you would argue that the Redemptor Dreadnought should probably be about 85 points if this thing's 90.
Yeah, and the Redemptor Dreadnought's sole purpose is to be a weapons platform. But all of its weapons are heavy, so it can't move. The moment it does, it's hitting on 4s. And then you're like, oh, well, I could put a chaplain nearby to give it the +1 to hit. Which is mad, because then you're paying like 90 to 100 points for a character to babysit it. So, I think it's mad. It's silly. They should have just made them the same points.
Yeah, it does seem very odd that the points differential is as big as it is, because I think once you actually add all the default war gear options to this thing, it's not even 130 points, right? It's like 125, something like that.
I think we worked out as like around 129 points.
Oh, okay, so near as damn it, 130. But then the Redemptor's what, 160?
I think we put it nearly around 170.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's mad, right? I mean, where do those 40 points go?
Because you get so it's a bit crazy really when you think about it, because the onslaught cannon. The heavy onslaught cannon it has is 12 heavy bolter shots, essentially. And then you're automatically going to give it the normal onslaught cannon, which gives it another 6. So if it's standing still, it's got 18 heavy bolter shots, which is pretty good. But that's a lot of points to be spending on a static thing that puts out that many heavy bolter shots, when you could just take a Devi squad for half the points. Whereas the Invictor, if you take the heavy flamer option, which is 2d6, maximum shots you're going to get 12, but those things automatically hit as well. And you're up close to your opponent in charge range, which means that you're getting a lot more bang for your buck.
No, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very, very strong. I mean, for that thing to come in at that sort of points cost makes it a must-have unit for pretty much all Space Marine players at this point, right?
Oh god, yeah, and it has the Angels of Death rule, which means it gets all the chapter tactics. Games Workshop have said that other chapters are getting it. So, like, if you think that, like, Dark Angels, for instance, not Dark Angels, Blood Angels, with this, it's terrifying. Because on the charge is getting 5 attacks, will be hitting on 3s, but then it'll be wounding everything in the game on 2s. Which is really good. Or if you take the Space Wolf one, it's hitting on 2s.
Mm.
So I think every army is going to benefit with at least one of these in. I think optimally you're going to want to take 2, just because it's such an aggressive thing to have in your opponent's face turn 1 to deal with.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. That is a scary option. There you go. But the model's quite nice as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of the model. It got a lot of hate the moment they released pictures for it, but I don't think it's deserved.
I think it's quite nice for what it is. It's grown on me for sure. Phil, what's your opinion of the model?
It looks a bit funny when I first saw it. I think it's going to grow on me. Looking back at all the original Primaris Space Marines, I think they've all grown on me over time. And although I pretty much liked most of them, I think initially I didn't like the Reavers, but now Reavers are probably my favourite looking ones out of all of them, which is a bit odd. And I think this is the same. It's like you can never judge a photo on its own because it's a 3D model. So when you see it up close, nicely painted, which we'll be doing this weekend, because they no doubt have it on display, we'd probably sit and be like, oh, that looks really cool. I think my initial thought was it just looks like a Redemptor, and therefore it looks too similar. And yeah, they've explained it away that it's based on Redemptor. So knowing that, I'm a bit more likely to give it a pass. I think if it looked a little bit more lightweight and they had streamlined the arms down a little bit smaller so it looked less like a Redemptor chassis, then it would be better, in my opinion. But yeah, no, I just don't like it's like the bull bars or the guard bars, whatever they are. That kind of design is like a reoccurring feature in the new Primaris stuff that I'm not a huge fan on. It also looks quite fiddly to paint as well.
Oh yeah, you're definitely going to have to do some serious sub-assemblies on this thing, aren't you? You're not going to do this in a oneer. But yeah, Phil, while you're talking, mate, I mean, which of the various models that are in the new range of models would you like to highlight and or discuss?
So I wanted to talk about the Incursor Squad, which is the multi-part variant of the Infiltrator kits. Now, I really like the Infiltrators overall, although they are a bit what's called tactical, so they do have a bit too much gear on them, potentially. These guys look pretty... Well, the helmet looks stupid. That's what I'm going to say. The weird, as you said earlier, the Geordie LaForge visor, I was thinking more Cylons. Looks a bit stupid, and the miniature sort of... like arch that they have for the mouth, which weirdly looks like the old school Space Marines, tactical Space Marines. It's like almost like their kind of mouth guard, but even smaller. So it just looks a bit odd. But then I'm thinking, actually, maybe all the helmets don't look like this, and that this is just like a one-off variant. And I was looking at Richard's Crimson Fist that he's working on, and he's got his Space Marine Scouts, and the Scouts, one of the models has this same kind of visor, so it actually has precedence. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, like, kind of makes sense, because these are sort of kind of Scouts. So seeing that made me feel a lot better about the model. Hopefully they don't all have that visor. I mean, the one we're seeing at the moment also doesn't have the top half of the helmet. It's just the front part, because helmets are now like these weird multi-part options. So it'd be interesting to see one fully built. Be interesting to see if there's other variations of the helmet, like the kind of the giant, like almost like speed dar on the gun. Kind of looks cool, even though it's oversized. I do like it. And then he's got like a giant Auspex type thing on the backpack, and it looks cool as well. All kind of, so you've got the visor, and those two things all give you a sense of, oh, this is why they can ignore sort of minus to hits, and they can ignore cover. I was like, okay, cool. There's lots of visual hints to their kind of ability to be really good at seeing stuff.
Well, they have also shown an image of another of these Incursors carrying a large haywire bomb, and he...
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so he is again, quite interesting in terms of how the model comes together. I think the thing I find with Phobos armor is I'm torn, because certain models, when posed correctly and delivered, like for example that new Primaris Phobos Lieutenant model that they've done, which is more in the theme of the Reavers as opposed to the other Primaris Lieutenant that was done in Shadowspear. This guy with his kind of Reaver mask looks like a really, really cool model. It's very dynamically posed, it's very well done. But I also find with Phobos armor a lot of the time, I mean, I've built some Redeemers and not Redeemers, Reavers, sorry, and I find that some of them just look really, really plain and really uninteresting. I think it's not as hefty a kind of silhouette as the normal Marines, and for some reason that more sort of slender design kind of takes something away from the majesty of the Marine. But I do I do agree with you. I think it's really interesting what they're doing, and especially it's also kind of interesting that they're just covering these things in cameras and sights and all sorts of other stuff to really kind of drum home that, or to really kind of confirm the whole this thing has optics, it will see you point, which is kind of cool.
Well, that second model, actually, I do really like the way the visor's sort of up, and you can see a bit of its forehead, and the pose, I think, works much better than the first image. I actually quite like the sort of plainer style, sort of bog standard Primaris Marines, where they don't have too much detail on them. Like, they're not ornate like old school Marines are. They're kind of more modern looking. And I was like, brilliant, these are going to be a lot easier to paint because they're a lot more simplistic. But then, actually, since then, every other one's kind of been festooned with gear, which is great for detail, more of a pain in terms of time consuming, in terms of painting, just on one. And these guys, I get why they've got to carry all their gear, because they're meant to be infiltrating sort of ahead of the normal supply chain, so they wouldn't actually be able to get gear unless they're carrying it. So it does make sense that they're carrying stuff. But I think I'd rather, if it is an option to remove some of those bits, then maybe I'll take them off.
What do you reckon, Joe? What's your thoughts and feelings on the Alden Cursor? I mean, what are the rules, Joe? I mean, you got the book. Tell us the stuff.
So, rules-wise, they've got the standard Primaris Marine stat line. Like, exactly the same, because, as they've explained, that all Primaris armor is the same. So, the Phobos armor is the lightweight version, and to become an intercessor, you just clip on some more stuff. And then, for an aggressor, you just clip on even more stuff. But because you've got even more stuff on, you get extra toughness and extra wounds and stuff. So these guys come with the Oculus bolt carbines, which are a rapid-fire bolt gun at 20 points range, but the target does not receive the benefit of cover to its saving throw, which is really, really good, dealing with things like pesky Eldar Rangers, stuff like that, or like guard in buildings, quite useful. They come with paired blades, so when resolving attack with this weapon, an unmodified to hit roll scores an additional hit, and they've got 2 attacks base, 3 for the sergeant. So if you've got a big unit of them, you're going to be getting a few extra hits out of that.
So that's a hit roll of a 6, right?
An unmodified hit roll of a 6, which is pretty good. So if you come up against something like Plague Bearers, you're still going to be getting multiple hits out of them, stuff like that. The Haywire Mine is in your movement phase. One model from your army with Haywire Mine that has not been primed can prime it. And then you basically put the mine within 1 inch of them, more than 3 inches away from an enemy. Basically, if an enemy unit comes within 3 inches of it, roll a dice on a 2+, it explodes and does D3 mortal wounds to the unit. If it's a vehicle, it's D3 +1.
Tidy.
Yeah, so if you've got multiple units of these, you can create like a little death alley, which is quite nice, and try and so for armies like Harlequins have got very expensive 1 wound units, they're going to want to avoid that area. So if you want to kind of screen off in the early game. That's a good way of doing it. Conceal positions, where you set this unit up in deployment. They can be set up anywhere in the battlefield 9 inches away from your enemy or their deployment zone. Multi-spectrum array. They ignore hit modifiers and ballistic modifiers. So that's combat and shooting. So they're actually quite good in combat then. They're a lot better than I thought they were. And they've got smoke grenades. So instead of shooting, they can just wang a grenade out and be -1 to hit.
I mean, that's pretty tidy. How many points they're coming in at, Joe?
So,
and please stall while I look through the book frantically.
Blah, 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 blah. They're 19 points a model base.
Okay.
In Cursor Squad. Yeah, 19 points a model base. The gun, the Oculus Doodah, is 0 points. And the paired blades, blah, 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 is also 0.
How odd. So they are actually 2 points cheaper than the Infiltrators.
They are, but personally, I think the Infiltrators are better.
Specifically because?
They stop your opponents deep striking within 12 inches of them, which is massive against things like Genestealer Cult and Orcs.
True.
And even demons as well. Like, deep strike reliant armies will really struggle if you screen off well with a couple of units of these.
But that is a very match-up specific scenario for the sake of 2 points a model.
Their guns are better as well on the Infiltrators.
Are they?
They're still rapid-fire bolt guns, but every 6 to hit automatically scores a hit and wound on the target.
Oh, hit and wound. Didn't you say these guys had that as well?
No. Their bolt guns are just... They don't get cover save.
Yeah, you just don't get cover saves against it.
No. But obviously they ignore negative modifiers.
Yeah, which is
pretty
amazing.
Which is pretty amazing. But so if you're shooting at, they're not going to do much against Eldar flyers, but they'll be good against Plague Bearers.
It's very good that they clarified as well that they only ignore negative modifiers, so obviously you can still give them
You can still buff them. But then the Infiltrators, if they've got the comms array, if there's a Phobos captain or lieutenant on the table, then they get the bonus of them without having to be within 6 inches. So they're always hitting re-rolls of 1 and wounds of 1.
Oh, okay. But that's the Infiltrators, yeah?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, it's still cool, though, I suppose. I mean, again, it's just nice to have another cheaper Infiltrator-esque unit, isn't it? And it looks quite nice, as Phil said.
Oh, yeah, they look really good. I think they'd work well in concert with each other. So if you had like 2 5-man squads of Infiltrators to zone off people deep striking in, and then maybe like 1 10-man squad of Incursors in the middle to chuck down or 2 5-man squads to chuck down the mines to block people coming in on foot, that's a massive denial zone that you've got going on. And then they can both deal with both different types of units.
Yeah.
So, yeah. You could make a really cool Phobos only army now, I reckon.
No, without a doubt.
Just maybe with some flyers or something in for fire support.
No,
for the big stuff. But then I really like the suppressors as well. And they do quite well. But that's for another time. What is your favourite unit? We've spoken about ours. You speak about yours, because we know you like talking. So go ahead.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's not so much my favourite unit. It's just more a unit that I wanted to more a model that I wanted to talk about, which is the Chief Librarian Tigerius. I was really torn between talking about Chief Librarian Tigerius and the Impulsor, because the Impulsor is quite an interesting looking thing, but I feel like they haven't shown off enough of it yet to make a full judgment, whereas obviously Chief Librarian Tigerius is out today. And it's interesting because obviously this is a brand new model for an established character. This is one of the first characters other than Marneus Calgar to make the transition from regular Space Marine to Primaris Space Marine. This guy and Khan represent, the first in the new wave of Primaris models, and I felt like that was something interesting to talk about, I suppose, or sort of discuss. I mean, as the model goes, looks really nice, I think it's fair to say. I am always intrigued these days by GW's consistent requirement for heroic characters to be having 1 foot up on a rock. That's the most seemingly consistent thing now about all new Space Marine characters, is that 1 foot must consistently be elevated above the other. I don't know what that is in terms of like just heroic posing or why that works. I mean, anyone got any theories about that?
Well, I think it's a reflection of the players, because it's a thing I've noticed a lot, especially at Warhammer World events, because they've got low tables and low stools. The gamers tend to have one leg unnecessarily up, like resting on the stool, and then hold their arms on their knee, or have like an elbow and then place their head as if they're in deep thought. And the designers have been walking around Warhammer World and being like, that is a power pose there.
We gotta all
Marine that one.
Phil, you often, exercising the power pose during games?
All the time, obviously. That's my default go-to.
Absolutely. A few good lunges.
Yeah. I do think just in general, it sort of makes sense. The hero characters are on something to raise them up slightly, so it visually makes them bigger than your regular models. Just having one leg up allows you to really dynamically shift the pose of the model and allow you to do more with it than if it's just like on a flat base.
No, agreed.
So I can see why they are doing it, but it does look odd when you see several of those models all side by side and they've all got their right leg up on a rock, and the rock is just poking out almost like a bit of a triangle shape out of the ground, so it's a nice gentle slope. And they all look kind of similar. I don't think that's a product of copying and pasting or anything, or maybe it's just a design trend that they have within the studio. Maybe it's a big joke and they're going to be like, let's see how long we can get away with this before someone recognises it. I don't think it's anything like that, but I think it just allows them to be a bit more creative with the pose of the model, which is obviously what they want to do for special characters. So it sort of makes sense, but it does mean they all end up doing something like that.
Yeah. I mean, all 3 of the new Ultramarines characters, Calgar, Guilliman, and Tigerius, have their right leg lifted up onto a rock.
But maybe they all went to the same power pose seminar, and they have like a little servitor that just brings a rock around with them. Even Belisarius Cool's got his foot on a book.
True.
Everyone's doing it. But maybe I think what they could do is just make more scenic bases for models, like what they did with the Harlequins, for instance. All of their characters are on like a piece of terrain, which gives them more presence, but without like looking the same. And even like the limited edition captain they do for Warhammer World events, the lieutenant with the who's got the helmet underneath his arm. He's stood with his legs like just apart normally, but they've given him a plastic like molded base that rises him up a little bit. Why can't they just do that?
Well, clearly they are. It was just a little observation that I was making there. The other thing that's actually quite interesting about this model, when you look at the sprue as available to view on Games Workshop's own website, is that this is one of the first Primaris characters, I think actually the only new Primaris character that doesn't come with a helmeted and unhelmeted option.
Ooh.
So that's interesting. I mean,
so is it because librarians never have helmets on?
Well, no, because
they've got to be there psychic powers.
The standard Primaris Librarian comes with both a helmeted or unhelmeted version. The single pose miniature of so to say it's the only character isn't correct, because actually the one from the Primaris the Phobos captain from Shadowspear doesn't have a helmeted option. The Primaris Lieutenant in Phobos armor from Shadowspear doesn't have a helmeted option, nor does the Phobos Librarian. So those three also have that same scenario. But prior to this, everyone else has had a helmet.
Yeah, but they're all scouty characters, so it makes sense for them not to be having helmets on. So yeah.
But yeah, I was a bit disappointed actually, because I actually would have. I kind of, personally speaking, I prefer the helmeted versions of all of the other characters that have been available so far. So the Marnius Calgar I have with the helmeted version, Gilliman, same deal. So I was a little bit surprised, unless I'm desperately missing something, for Tigurius not to have that option. So that was a bit of a funny little thing, but it's just something I observed. But
It might
Maybe
be like
he's just got a look that he's sticking to.
That's it. That's it. He knows his own mind. He's got his special appearance. Also, as well, if I was to go back to my RoboCop references from earlier, bit of a RoboCop face as well to my Tigurius. He looks like helmetless RoboCop. Just to say, all the wires coming out of his face. He's got a very Murphy-like look to him.
what RoboCop are we talking about here?
RoboCop, the original films, not the 2016 version with Samuel L. Jackson and some other people.
Which was amazing. Just saying.
It was not.
No, Joe.
What are you on about?
I mean, it was a perfectly reasonable action movie. It was not a RoboCop movie.
It was. It had RoboCop in it.
But RoboCop. Anyway,
It was called RoboCop.
Yeah, but this is we're not doing a movie review show here, Joe. We'll talk about it later. RoboCop is more than just a man. It's all about kind of corporate America and the greed and all the horrendous satire and all that sort of stuff.
All right then.
It's amazing. It's the same as Starship Troopers, where it's all like, sign up, citizen, and da-da-da-da-da, and it's all about, and the bit at the end of it where they go, what's the bug saying? It's afraid! Yeah! Kill it! All that sort
America!
America, yeah! Anyway, we're going off on a tangent, as often we do. The other thing that's worth mentioning, this guy is expensive. I mean, God, 25 quid for Tigurius. So what happened there?
He's an expensive boy, but then I think they've got to make him expensive because they're not going to sell as many of him as like a generic one.
Well, you say that. I mean, it's funny because it all sort of brought it into focus, because I was like, well, how much is a generic one? And you look at it, they're £22.50. When did these characters get so absolutely absurdly expensive?
I don't know. Well, I work at Trouble Heroes War Games where you get 25% off. So I always just go there.
Well, indeed. I have bought some of these characters recently, thank you to Warhammer Conquest, for $7.99. I got 2 of the Primaris Chaplains for a whole, £15 or whatever it is, £16. There you go, maths. £15, 98 pence, which is a perfectly reasonable price for a Primaris Chaplain, especially when you consider if you bought it off the shelf at GW, it's £22.50.
That's got to be attacking their margins somewhat.
Well, indeed. Maybe that was one of the models that got increased in the recent price increases.
Yeah, because they weren't selling anymore because of those darn magazines.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think that's pretty much anyone who's probably got a Primaris Chaplain probably got theirs in Conquest, I imagine, because Lord knows you weren't buying it for £22.50.
Yeah.
But maybe you will be now that they got the new sexy rules, right?
Oh, God, yeah. They are actually well worth taking, but I personally don't like the model, so I'll be converting him.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So if I can close out the topic on Tigurius, I actually think this is a very good sign of things to come for upcoming Primaris upgrades. I was very happy with Calgar in the end. Early doors, I was a little bit hesitant about him, but I've since purchased, built, and used the model, and I actually think he's fantastic. And I think, based on what I'm seeing for Tigerius, he looks really strong. Khan as well looks great. I mean, really, really amazing reimagining of these incredible Space Marine characters. Interestingly, if you check Games Workshop's website, unless anything has changed in the last 24 hours, they don't actually show you the sprue for Khan, which could imply that maybe he does have a helmeted option, or something they don't want you to know. Maybe he miraculously can be turned into, maybe he's a dual kit, or something like that. Or they just forgot to photograph it and include it, which is most certainly the most likely scenario. But yeah, exciting times all around, I'd say, on the front of Space Marine models. Yeah, that'll do probably for that bit. We'll move on now to the next segment. Thank you. Woo! So now, in this part of the podcast, we are going to attempt to broadly discuss or debate what we think the impact of this Space Marine book will be to the overall game. Is it going to make any noticeable changes? Is it still going to have the issues that are readily established or exist within Space Marines as a faction as a whole? And what are the other interesting things that people are talking about, and what do we think of them? In general, it's just a broad conversation about Space Marines, because at this moment in time, Joe does have the book, as we've established and continue to reiterate throughout, but we haven't really had an opportunity to fully digest it, and obviously we haven't had an opportunity to see what is to come in the future. So in many respects, this is just a bit of kind of broad speculation about how things may or may not go. So, with that said, Joe, what do you think, mate? What do you reckon the impact of Space Marines will be?
My personal, I don't think they're going to be the new top tier army.
No?
No, just because they've got lots of stuff and they're really, really good, but I don't think they have an answer to the Eldar list of the 5 to 7 flyers. I think they're going to be the new high level gatekeeper army, and they'll make those top tier armies work for it. But I don't think that they're going to reach the pinnacles. In your big 100, 200 man events, you might get one or two ending up in the top 20. Because armies that are good now are perfectly designed for killing Space Marines. Dark Eldar are still going to be great because disintegrators just blow through them. Chaos Knights are just going to blow through them, and Chaos Space Marines as well have access to a lot of Strength 5, Strength 6, Strength 7 damage to weapons. But that said, is things like the new Warsuit, which can be up in your opponent's grill turn 1, for something like the Eldar army, is going to be a bee in the bonnet, as they say, because those kind of flyer armies rely heavily on having the flyers do all the damage and then hiding 3 or 4 small cheap units on the table that grab objectives. But if those units are under threat literally turn 1, then it's going to give those armies a bit of trouble. Yeah.
I mean, I think personally, when you talk about the army, I think the thing you've always got to look at, and as has sort of been established with things like the Elder Flyer army list, is the impact of vehicles. And obviously, we're getting a new vehicle in this range, or 2 if you include the Warsuit, but we are also getting the Impulsor as well, which is very interesting. And obviously not just the Impulsor, because we actually technically got a vehicle with the release of Armageddon, the new kind of, big cannon variant repulsor that I've forgotten the name of. Do you know what the name of that is, Joe?
Yes, the Repulsor Executioner.
Repulsor Executioner. So I think that's going to be really interesting, because I think those vehicles represent some very real tactical flexibility that wasn't previously there.
Well, they are the Repulsor can put out something like 24 heavy bolter shots, which is terrifying, but it is a lot of points. A lot of points.
You say a lot of points, but I mean, to me, I feel like, because it's not 200, it's only about 250 points, right?
Oh, it's more than that. Hang on.
Basic repulsor, didn't it go up 30 points in the new codex or something?
Yeah.
Like that?
Oh, okay.
A lot. So you're looking at nearly 300 points for that thing.
Which is reasonable, right? I'm just saying in terms of where you're seeing certain kind of competitive builds coming into effect, things that can do a lot of damage output are also survivable and have a number of other little benefits, such as the fly keyword. Definitely have options, but I think you're right in asserting the value of the warsuit, because I think, yeah, you that's definitely going to keep a lot of people very honest, because, you know, essentially, if you're playing the Elder Flyer army list and you come up against someone who's rocking that warsuit, they're going to effectively put a lot of pressure onto you turn one. Now, fair enough, even though technically you can walk through the flying bases, obviously those of us who play competitively often understand that that's not always as feasible as it seems it could be. Yeah. And obviously the Flyers can try and keep you out for turn one, but again, that's another really interesting thing, because you can have a great deal more control over the turn one antics of that Elder player, you know, by forcing them into very specific tactical decisions, which is, you know, for very high level players, definitely a strong option.
And it's gonna put those Eldar armies in a defensive position from the get go, which is a position they don't want to be in, because they need to be aggressive with those Flyers, taking out those backline units that are going to threat the stuff on the ground, but also is actually going to hurt those Flyers. So, like, if someone's rocking a couple of those Dreadnoughts and a couple units of infiltrators getting up close, in their backline they might have two of those executioners, which you can buff them up so they get +1/+2 to hit kind of thing. They're going to be taking out those Flyers, and then that Eldar player is stuck in a situation of, like, do I take out the thing that can threaten my Flyers, or do I take out the thing that's going to be threatening my ability to gain points? And then, like, things like Sicarans now, super good, because they get chapter tactics. And Leviathan Dreadnoughts now as well have got a big boost. So, yeah, I think, like, I don't think they'll be winning all the games, but they're going to cause a headache for a lot of people.
I think the thing as well is the sheer amount of flexibility, right? And I think that's always going to be interesting for people, because currently it's very easy to measure up what you're going to be playing against when you see a Space Marine army. Bar a few tricky army lists like Richie's Heat 2 army, which we forgot to mention in the intro, afforded him a third place finish at that 40k Brawl event. So actually Richie did the best of all of all three of us at that event with his Marine.
He actually managed to score a draw and 2 wins. So that draw actually placed him quite highly in the event.
And, you know, the draw was a very close game against a very, very good opponent with a very good list as well, which is no small thing, because Richie was playing against Genestealer Cult in Game 1, and the Genestealer Cult army list he was playing against is essentially a replica of what the guy who won GT Heat 1 took. So we know that list has got capabilities, and we know the guy playing it's actually pretty decent. So yeah, Rich did very well to get a draw out of that game.
Yeah.
I mean, on the topic of Genestealer Cult, it's fair to say as well, the Infiltrators are definitely going to be a bit of a thorn in the side of those guys, right?
Oh, God, yeah. So they're going to be knocking Genestealer on the head quite quickly, Genestealer Cult armies. I think Genestealer Cult armies are going to have to be putting in more shooting, I think, into their armies. They're going to have to start relying heavily on the guard aspects of, like, Leman Russes to help them out. Because they have to deal with those infiltrators turn 1 for their stuff coming in turn 2. And if those infiltrators hold out till turn 3, then that's potentially a loss for that Genestealer player.
Well, the way the blip system works is that either at the start of your turn 1, if you're going first, or at the end of your opponent's movement phase in their turn 1, you need to reveal the blip tokens. Now, there's a number of stratagems and methodologies that you can use to take those blips and essentially put them in reserves. And as has been clarified with the FAQs, they don't count towards tactical reserves. So your whole army can be deployed via the blips. But as is clearly stated in their codex, when they arrive from the blip, they count as coming in from reserves. Now, this is a point that some Genestealer Cult players have argued, and I understand why they argue it. And I'm not saying that what I'm saying here is the definitive answer, but based on everything I've read, I've not seen anything that suggests that it's not the case, that they're not coming in from reserves. Everything I've read says they are, they just don't count towards tactical reserves. So theoretically, if a unit of infiltrators got within 9 inches of a blip, or just outside of 9 inches, like 9 inches 1 millimeter, which I appreciate I'm mixing measurements, but bear with me. You're just outside of 9 inches, but now the Genestealer Cult player can't deploy within 12 of you, and essentially the blip token that they have is I think it's like 1.5 inches or something wide. It's not very big, right? I mean, it's not the size of an objective marker. It's slightly smaller, and that blip token, once you try and place your model within one of it, you still then also need to ensure that you're outside of 12 of the model. Which once you do the maths, you're like going, well, actually, you theoretically can't deploy within one of your blip, based on the maths and the things and the stuff. And if you can't deploy within one of your blip, you're removed as a casualty. You're just destroyed. So yeah, there's a real chance that infiltrators with a dodgy turn 1 where they basically wrap around all these blips, like especially with the sort of movement they've got and options they have, you could find yourself in a situation where turn 1 you could just be turning it before battle round 1, even before you even get out of your movement phase, or at the very end of your movement phase, you might have just won the entire game because you'd be like, yeah, nothing your army can deploy, I win. Which would be,
I guess, for the Genestealers, you need to use, because you can have like fake blips, so you probably need your first few blips to almost be a screen for the infiltrators, and then make sure you position your real blips slightly further behind.
Yeah.
So it probably puts you a bit of a disadvantage in terms of how you can position, but I think that's something that's like on them to make sure they can do, and not like, I mean, I think it'd be quite hard for them to auto lose a game, like by the end of turn 1, for example, but potentially you could lose a few units if you're not careful.
Well, indeed. I just want to see someone recreate in 8th edition that classic Kroot photo where, there's a line of Kroot on the back of the board and 2 lads looking in the rulebook trying to work out what's just happened with a bloke with his thumbs up. I just want that, but with infiltrators against a Genestealer Cult player. That's what we need to see happen.
It is ridiculously strong against them, and I think it means that I think maybe that's the way that this Space Marine army is designed, that it instantly puts all of its opponents on the defensive. Orc players are like, well, crap, I can't go forward. I can't use the jump to put my 30 boys in your face because I can't be in charge range. So I'm going to have to sit back and rely on my incredibly unreliable shooting to deal with these units that are in cover with 2 wounds.
I mean, it's not reasonable to say that orcs have unreliable shooting. With a few stratagems and a few other odds and sods, they are probably one of the most reliable shooting armies in the game. But I do take the point.
They've got 2 good shooting units in looters and that shock attack gun. But if they can't see the unit they're shooting at, then those boys ain't getting in, essentially.
I totally agree with you. I think, to your point, they only have a couple shooting units, but boy, what a couple shooting units they are.
And if you're taking eliminators, which you should, I think now, you go first, those eliminators are going to be taking out that shock attack gun pretty quickly. Does Grot Shields work for any unit, or is it only boys?
There's a question.
I think it's only boys now, isn't it?
I will find the FAQ while you nicely talk amongst yourselves.
2 hours later.
So no, it's any clan infantry unit.
Okay, so the old shock attack gun does have a defense against the snipers. But the thing is, like you just hit them last, because if you are packing those 10 veteran intercessors now are terrifying, because if they don't move, they're whacking out 4 shots with stratagems.
Well, you don't even need to use them as veterans now, though, do you?
No, not even that. You just need to do the special stratagem that gives them rapid fire 2. So good. And,
now, is that stratagem the same name as the one in Vigilus, or can you use both of them in one
Phil,
turn?
look at you gaming it up here. Hello.
Well, just curious. That's all.
I mean,
because I basically wondered if the Vigilus one was superseded by the one in the Codex.
I would imagine so.
The specific wording of the Vigilus one is that your gun becomes rapid fire 2. So, unless the other one says you get +1 to your rapid fire.
No, it just says.
No, more like, could you do it on 2 separate units? Because they're 2 separate stratagems.
Hang on, what's the name of the one in Vigilus?
Oh, the veteran Indominus Crusade MacGuffin.
No. What's its proper name?
Oh, what, is that not enough? Can you not work with that?
Well, no, because it'd be the name of the stratagem itself.
All right, Joe, give me a minute. We'll do the transition again. Here we go.
5 minutes later.
So the one in Vigilus Defiant, the Indominus Crusade stratagem, is called Rapid Fire. What's your one called, Joe?
Called Rapid Fire.
Ah, well, there you go. It would seem unlikely.
So, and then then you've got the Veteran Intercessor stratagem in here, which gives you the extra leadership and extra attack.
Does Rapid Fire in your lovely new Space Marine book specifically specify that Veteran Intercessors can be affected by Rapid Fire, or is it any Intercessor?
It just says 1 Intercessor squad.
When the Indominus version, it says Veteran Intercessor. So maybe that's different enough that you could theoretically use both of them. Maybe.
Doesn't does your one, Joe, cost 2 CP as well?
It does, yes.
So I think that's the difference. Yeah, but for that one, you've still got to pay the 1 CP tax to make the squad the veterans in the first place. So I think that's the workaround. So it might be they're both compatible, even though they've got the same name. Although there might be some rule, like FAQ, where if it's got the same name, you can't use it regardless of which book it comes from.
Yeah, to be honest, but before in the Crusade detachment, you've got to pay 1 CP to get the detachment, 1 CP to get the leader for it. Then you're paying an extra CP on top to make that unit veteran. So you're already spending 3 CP before you get to do the rapid fire strat in the first place.
Well, you're not spending 1 CP to get the leader if the leader's your leader. The leader's just your leader. Also, you only spent for the veteran, yeah. So you spend, say you're spending 2 for that, then you spend 1 to do the stratagem for 1 turn. That's 3 CP. But here's the thing: if you do that stratagem twice, it's the equivalent of value, isn't it? But then you still have the benefit of being a veteran. You get the +1 leadership, and you get the +1 attack. So arguably, if that squad is able to successfully use rapid fire twice, you've actually had better value for your command points using the Indominus Crusade.
Yeah, but then the Indominus one, they only get to use rapid fire once in this situation.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you had an intercessor squad and you used rapid fire on it twice, i.e. 1 turn and then another turn, that's 4 command points. Because we're saying it's a 10-man unit, because that's the kind of quote optimal way of trying to do it. Whereas if you did it this way, it's 2 CPs to get to the situation where you've got the squad, and then it's 1 CP to use it, and then 1 CP to use it again. So it's the same amount of command points, is what I'm saying.
All right, then. That's fair.
And you take the Warlord, because here's the other thing, right? That Warlord trait now, actually, when you actually think about it, the Indominus Crusade ability to gain the extra chapter tactic now is terrifying, right? Because those chapter tactics are really amazing. Plus, everything in your army gets it. It's not just intercessors. So, I mean, that's pretty big all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's like a crazy good combo.
Yeah, because all of a sudden you're... Well, hang on, let me check the wording on the... So use this stratagem when choosing your army. Pick a Space Marine detachment from your army to become the Indominus Crusade Special Detachment. Primaris Captains, Primaris Lieutenants, Primaris Ancients, Primaris... Intercessor Squads and Interceptor Squads in this detachment have the Indominus Crusade keyword. And then the Grey Shield's ability is once per in the movement phase, your Warlord can choose 4 units. Okay, fine. So it's only the Indominus Crusade units that will benefit from that. So it's not like your vehicles will be able to get access to these to using 2 chapter tactics for a time.
Yeah, but still, if you take, like, I think Iron Hands is probably one of the best ones to use in this combo. Because you could take a charge of Iron Hands with your extra hitting on 5s in a Savage Overwatch. You can beat the snot out of your opponent, and then next turn become Ultramarines and fall back, and then shoot the crap out of them.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely an option. Equally as well, though, I mean, like, silly things like you can go, I'm a Crimson Fist, and then, oh no, you can't do that because Crimson Fist couldn't get this in the first place, could they? Because they can't be... Oh no, wait, they probably
they still can.
Yeah, so you could be...
They had their own attachment, but they also could do that one as well.
Yeah, so the Grey Shield ability is, until the start of your next friendly Indominus, gain the benefit of chapter tactics in addition to any of the other already have. They are considered to be... to have the keyword for the chapter that chapter tactic belongs to for the purposes of resolving that chapter tactic. Okay, fair enough. And it specifically states the name of all the different codex disciplines. So pick the additional chapter tactic from the following codex disciplines. So essentially, I mean, what are the new codex disciplines called, Joe? If you could just quickly run through a couple of them.
They're called, so hang on.
Or chapter tactics, rather, sorry. From the following. Codex discipline is actually the Ultramarines one, according to this.
So, Warlord traits. So, chapter tactics, the disciplines are called Ultramarines, Codex Discipline.
Yep.
Imperial Fist is Siege Masters.
Yep.
White Scars is Lightning Assault.
Yep.
Raven Guard, Shadow Masters.
Yep.
Salamanders, Forged in Battle.
No, Forged in Battle is not an available option in this list so far.
Iron Hands, The Flesh is Weak.
That is in here, yeah.
Black Templars is Righteous Zeal. And Crimson Fists is No Matter the Odds.
Which is not in here either. But, so Master Artisans is what the Salamanders one is called in this book. So, technically, you can't access that one. Again, this is one of these weird things. I don't know how this Indominus Crusade is going to work because, yeah, theoretically you could go with Siege Masters and also have... I don't know, you could be a Crimson Fist army, have the Indominus Crusade detachment and with a smaller unit that then gains +1 to hit, and then you could then use the Crimson Fist stratagem trait where you're ignoring cover and gaining extra shots on 6s. Admittedly, it's a natural 6, so if you roll a 5, it doesn't work for the purposes of this. But it's still really, really tasty. So I do still think there is a place for the Indominus Crusade, is where we kind of went with that.
Yeah. I imagine it'll probably get an FAQ.
I imagine so. I mean, it's needed, especially given the fact that they've changed the words for what a Salamander chapter tactic is.
Oh, God, yeah. So it'll probably be a day one FAQ.
No, I agree.
Well, they need to do a day one FAQ for all the Forge World units anyway, to make sure they all get the relevant abilities.
I mean, on the topic of chapter tactics, we could do a sort of, I don't know, a snog, marry, avoid type game here on the chapter tactics. Joe, which of the chapter tactics would you snog, marry, or avoid?
Oh, I don't know. So Snog, the one I'm going to play around with behind the bike sheds.
Yeah, exactly. Every now and again, you have a little flutter with it. You know, you're not willing to commit to it, but you know, it's not a bad option some of the time.
I really like the White Scars one. You know, everyone likes a guy in a leather jacket on a motorbike. Yeah, and because part of me always wants to run a bike army with loads, and now attack bikes are okay. They're not good, but they're okay.
Yeah.
Marry, you know, get in that long-term relationship, settle down, have some weird little superhuman babies. I actually really like Iron Hands.
Yeah. You like a good Iron Hand.
Strong. They'll look after you. They'll make you stuff. You know, yeah. I reckon their supplement's going to be really good. And we already know they're their own special character as well, so which is cool.
Yeah.
And then avoid Raven Guard.
Raven Guard.
They're not as strong as they were, and they actually kind of lose out. So now you get cover if you're 12 inches away, and you get -1 to hit if you're in cover. But that does include vehicles, so Dreadnoughts don't get it anymore.
Ugh.
So Dreadnoughts kind of lose out. And I think that's because they're too busy writing poetry and crying.
That's it.
What I like about that rule is it hopefully will get applied down the line to Alatok as well. Because it feels like they almost wrote that with Alatok in mind, so whenever the Elder Codex might get an update, that they bring that rule in line with this one.
Yeah, because then it just automatically stops at those Alatok flyers getting -2 to be hit.
Yeah.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Can't have that nonsense going on. Well, there we go. Phil, I would ask you which of the various chapter tactics you would like to snog, marry, or avoid, but you don't have access to the book yet, so it seems like you couldn't make an educated choice. But you're still committed to the Black Templars, right?
Well, in terms of a future project, most likely, yeah, I'm kind of holding out that they get some... I think getting a supplement of their own is too optimistic. I presume they're just going to get one within the Imperial Fists one as a sort of secondary chapter. Sorry. Yeah, their chapter tactic is okay. It's not great. The ability to re-roll failed charges got tweaked slightly, because before you had to roll both dice. Now you can pick one or both, a bit like the Orc ability. So that's cool. And the ability to ignore mortal wound on a 5-up is okay if you're up against a kind of psych-heavy army, maybe. But out of all the others, it doesn't fit a good one. And in fact, like the White Scars ability to advance and charge seems way better for getting into combat than the ability to re-roll your charges. Although there's a cool combination my friend Tim mentioned earlier, not our Tim, but an Orky Tim that I met in No Retreat. He was talking about how Black Templars could be coming out of a drop pod turn 1 with some vets and double chainswords. And with one of the, I think it's a Chaplain Litany of Faith or Litany of Hate, you can get +2 to charge. So obviously you deploy 9 inches away, but you get +2, so you need to roll a 7. And then with the Black Templar ability to reroll 1 or both dice, means you're almost guaranteed, I think, to get that charge off. So that's like a super cool combo with that, and the ability to do stuff like that to maybe do turn 1 charges, I think could be quite good. But on the face of it, I think they're a bit rubbish. I think it's when you combo it with other stuff, it might do really well. I think the problem with Black Templars, assuming you don't get any units, I doubt they will, but Primaris aren't very close combat specialized in any way. I mean, you've got the Reavers, which is the closest thing to a close combat unit, but you don't have anything else, basically.
But Intercessors, like, if they're veterans and on the charge, they're getting 4 attacks each.
Well, this is it. So, and obviously with your combat doctrines, you can be -1 AP, which is quite good. So I think there's something to be said about doing like a Black Templar kind of Grey Shields vet using that Vigilist attachment. I think that has potential. Maybe comboed with either a Repulsor to put your 10-man unit in and get them up the board a bit quicker, or looking at using the new Impulsor, maybe. Although, actually, they've changed the way the auto bolters work, so they're now 3 shots, and you can obviously advance and shoot with them at -1 to hit. So I'm potentially going to deck out a couple of squads with the auto bolt rifles and just have a big blob of men just charging up the board. I don't know. I'm still thinking about possible options.
The auto bolt rifles have got that stratagem where you basically don't roll to hit.
Oh yes, they do. That's only is that in the book as well, or is that just in the Vigilance?
That is in the Codex as well.
Oh, okay, and that's quite tasty. But auto hit's pretty nice.
It's definitely in here.
I think it's called Boltstorm, mate.
Boltstorm.
Boltstorm. Hit you with the broadsword.
Yes. Yeah, it's called Boltstorm. 2 CPs.
Right.
When resolving
cool.
an attack made with this weapon against a target that is within half range, do not make a hit roll. It automatically scores a hit. So
That's pretty
10
tasty.
guys can advance forwards and just wrap away.
Hopefully they update the Deathwatch to get this variant of Boltstorm as well, because the Deathwatch with this would be pretty terrifying. Not Boltstorm, but the free shot assault bolters would be gnarly.
Well, I imagine they will. I think there'll be FAQs for Blood Angels, Dark Angels, and Space Wolves at Deathwatch. Just kind of bring them up to scratch.
Yeah. Well, if you think that you can take the aggressor in the kill team with the intercessors and then they ignore the negative modifier for advancing and firing these bolters, it's pretty tasty, especially with the special ammunition, because all of a sudden your range 24 goes to range 30 with a -1 built in, plus obviously they won't get the benefits of the doctrine, so I'll ignore that statement. But yeah, it's pretty good for the Deathwatch, if not anyone else.
Oh yeah, they're laughing.
Having a good time. That's what the Deathwatch needed. Yet more awesome stuff, which is cool. And I suppose actually one of the last points I'd probably like to touch on with regards to the Space Marine stuff is regular Space Marines didn't necessarily get some love, but they did get a 1-point reduction, right? They're 12 points a model now.
That is super good.
You think? Super
Is it
good.
12 points to mod 12 points? Or is it 13?
Oh, is it 13 now, not 12? I thought it was... Hang on.
They are 12 points a model, and the Scout is 11. And we had this discussion earlier, actually, is that I think, personally, that Scouts and Tactical Marines should be the same points.
Yeah?
Because if you look at their stat line, let's forget the fluff and all that for a minute, and just look at their stat line. The only thing different with a Scout and a Space Marine is their armor save. One's got a 3-up save, one's got a 4-up save. But Scouts get to infiltrate.
Yeah,
So,
which is a pretty big deal, right?
pretty big deal, which is huge. Surely that would be worth a point more. Almost in a way, they would be more expensive than tactical marines. But I think at this stage you just say they're the same points. You lose the save, but you get to infiltrate, so you get to be closer.
That would make sense, because actually what you find is people just have scouts because they're like, well, it's the cheapest option to fill out a battalion.
Yeah.
And actually making them the same price would actually make people then have to make a choice. So by default, you're going to get more variety in those armies, which is ultimately a good thing, right?
Well, I think it might work, because then people will be like, oh, I might take scouts to infiltrate, but I don't really want to be infiltrating. I just want more guns. And if I've got more guns in my deployment zone, I'll just take normal tactical marines because they get a better save as standard. So I think you're right, it will make armies a lot more versatile. But I think that's the way that they need to go, 11 points a model. And then they need to reflect that in the Chaos Space Marines as well. Because I think then you'd kind of see more horde-based Chaos Space Marine armies, which would be pretty cool. Because that's how they kind of function as an army. They just kind of flood people with numbers.
You can definitely see, though, with this slight points reduction and the overall rules changes, that there could be some uses for the regular Space Marines. I still don't think they're nearly as optimized as, obviously, Primaris Marines, but I think the point is that, you know, they've at least done something for them, which is a small mercy, I suppose. I mean, I think
they're pretty good. Like, they got tactical doctrines, improved chapter tactics. They've got, they've overhauled, I think, some of the rules for some of the units, like the vehicles. Like the drop pod, for example, is now super good and clearly going to get FAQ'd in some fashion. Because it's just broken, it seems.
I don't think the drop pod is broken.
I actually think the drop pod is a bit of a trap.
It's very much. It's like when you're doing like an escape room. It's a red herring. The drop pod.
Yeah. The people
potentially, for sure.
They're losing their minds over it, but it's 65 points for a drop pod, right? Yeah, 60 points. The only thing that you can put in it is Devastator Marines, which you don't want up close. Stern Guard, which admittedly, Stern Guard are only 14 points now and their guns don't cost extra. And everyone's like, give them Storm Bolters. But no, you just keep them bog standard and you leave them in your deployment zone because they just shoot twice as long range.
Sorry, the Stern Guard have become 14 points.
Yes.
Well, they're amazing. All right, there you go. I mean, that's a good change.
But then you don't put those in the drop pod. You just leave them in the deployment zone shooting at full range where they're not being threatened. Because if you're going to put them in a drop pod and put them up close range, it means they're going to die turn one in your opponent's turn.
At 14 points, I don't care.
Yeah, and then...
I literally don't care. Every one of my Space Marine squads will now just be like, they're the Stern Guard now. Just flipping take 30 of them and it's, 420 points. All right, that's happy days.
They still have the stratagem to get +1 to wound with their guns.
And their guns are -2 range 30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, mate, that's... Poof. They're all right, aren't they? 14,
Which means
are you sure they're 14 points?
Yeah. So, let's have a look. Elites. Stern Guard, 14.
Flipping heck. Well, all right then. They're terrifying now. But yeah,
And then War Gear,
it's just a bolt gun, isn't it?
just a bolt gun,
Yeah, so it's free.
special ammunition, which is amazing. And then the only other thing that can go in a drop board is a tactical squad, which is a bit meh.
Yeah, don't waste your time, mate. Take Stern Guard.
Yeah. You could take Vanguard if you feel a little bit cray-cray.
How many points is Vanguard?
A Vanguard Marine is a number of points. Bear with me now.
We are.
Vanguard is 14 points. 17 points with a jump pack.
What are you getting for 14 points?
14 points. Hang on.
Because they don't have the special ammunition rule, so I'm curious where that's coming from. What crazy new rule do they have to justify that increase? It's almost like they went, oh yeah, veterans are just 14 points now. Yeah, but one of them's got this really good special rule and the other one doesn't. Yeah, 14 points each, mate. Don't worry about it.
They're equipped with a bolt pistol, chainsword, frag and crack grenades.
Uh-huh. That is all?
Yes.
I mean, that's how have they the mental. So a Stern Guard squad is the same price as a Vanguard squad, although a Vanguard squad without jump packs. But a Vanguard squad has literally the exact same profile as the Stern Guard squad, except the Stern Guard squad has a gun that's -2 30-inch range, and the veteran blah blah blah, it's mad. There you go.
Is it they get a better, like, they get more choice in terms of their weapon loadout?
They do get more choice, yeah, but then you pay for the choices, right? You shouldn't be paying a base price for options if you're not wanting to use those options. It's madness. Just make the options more expensive rather than making the base models. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, Stern Guard veterans, based on them being 14 points flat, actually are quite terrifying because, yeah, take 30 of them, as I say, 420 points, right? If they're 140 for 10, so 140, 280, yeah, 420 points. Take them in rhinos for all I care, like literally, like that's.
You wouldn't take them anything. You just put them on buildings in your deployment zone, and they could just sit there blazing away for 4 turns until your opponent eventually kills them.
Yeah, there's definitely that to be said for them as well. I mean, that's pretty good. That's a pretty scary horde, and also they're all leadership 9, aren't they? Leadership 10 if you make them an ultramarine.
Leadership 8, 9 on a sergeant.
Oh, fine. But then obviously leadership 10 if you've got them as a ultramarine, unless they've kept the ultramarines get +1 to their leadership, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, leadership 10, flipping mental, and then you can still combat squad them up and oh. All right, fair enough. Well, there's something to be aware of. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be ridiculously powerful. I'm not here saying that that's going to be the unit that, you know, gets the wins. But I think, I mean, I'm struggling to think of something that is equally as versatile as.
Fun fact: when the tactical doctrine's on turn 2, they're AP -3 when shooting.
Crikey. And that's the thing, right? So 140 points. A tactical squad is 120 points. So for an extra 20 points, you get a squad with 2 attacks each, extra leadership, and 6 inches of extra range, and are -2, potentially -3. Madness! Yeah. And if they're Imperial Fists, they're ignoring cover. And getting extra shots on 6s.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Anyway, there you go. What was I going to conclude?
So what I kind of feel is when Games Workshop was asking what can we do to make Space Marines better, what we should do is keep the points the same, but just turn every single one of them into a Stern Guard.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, yeah. I mean, okay, fair enough. You don't get OBSEC with the Stern Guard, but if you're looking for an excuse to use your old Space Marine models, just go, yeah, this tactical squad is a unit of Stern Guard. Because, you know, why can't they be? It's like literally like, it's just a Space Marine with a bolt gun. Jobs are good. Maybe paint their helmets gold for effect and you'll be fine. But yeah, I was going to say on the drop pod actually, I'll just quickly try and end with this one. The drop pod thing, the red herring there as well is, right, is people are talking about, oh, we'll just drop them all over the place and then you won't be able to do anything with them. The stuff that comes out of them, bar the Stern Guard, and even those aren't that incredible. I'm probably bigging them up way too much, but, you know, that's not going to be overly concerning. And your opponent could just run up to those drop pods and just hug them. And just go, I'm going to charge the drop pod. And then it's like, cool, the drop pod won't do anything to you. Ace, now your entire army can't shoot at my really, really useful unit that wants to be in the mid-table. And then in my turn, I will just move off and shoot at you again because I've got the fly keyword in this example. And so it's just rubbish. Drop pods are not much cop, but I think Stern Guard. There you go. That's our hot tip. Hopefully no one actually listens to us because they'll probably regret it, but I reckon they've got some potential if nothing else.
Oh god, I think Stone Guard's the way forward. But if you do want to put them in drop pods, you give them combi flamers, and you don't take them as you do the homebrew chapter, where you can give them an extra 3 inches to their guns range, which means that their flamers are then range 11.
Ooh, that'd be pretty tidy.
Yeah, so you can do your old 7th edition trick of dropping 2 heavy flamers and 8 combi flamers onto someone's Eldar army.
Joe, do they have rules for the Land Raider Excelsior and or Rhino Primaris Rhino thing? The Games Workshop Warhammer World exclusive miniatures. Do they have rules in this book?
Bear with.
Land Raider Excelsior.
Land Raider Standard.
It's going to be an HQ choice, mate.
0.
Because I assume the 9 las cannon one? That's not in there either, I assume.
That is the Terminus Ultra, and that is a Ultramarines unit, and potentially, I mean, that could be in the Ultramarines book. Wouldn't that be lovely?
No, it's not in there.
Oh, boo.
In the Codex.
What was that?
It's not in the standard Codex anyway.
Well, it might be in the Ultramarines Codex. Woo, baby. Oh, that's the Terminus Ultra, not the Land Raider Excelsior. Alright, fine. There we go. I reckon that pretty much concludes our thoughts and feelings for the purposes of podcasting. Closing statements, gents, Space Marines. What do you reckon? Phil?
I'm super excited. I think, as Joe said at the very beginning, they're going to shake up the meta a bit. They're probably not going to be top tier because, what I like about them is they've got the tools to do everything, but they're so expensive you won't be able to field everything that you want in like a 1,750 or 2,000 point army. So you're going to have to specialise. So hopefully what we see, especially with the chapter tactics, is everyone will be taking a bunch of different chapters and a bunch of different play styles in terms of their army composition. It'd be really disappointing if everyone has like math hammered it and the internet has decreed, for example, that Iron Hands is the best chapter, and then everyone just suddenly paints their army black or go, my army's Iron Hands, even though it's blue and has the Ultramarine symbol on it, because that's the best chapter tactic. That'd be a bit disappointing if that is what happens, but I think overall you'll see a lot more diversity in kind of lists. Hopefully, I mean, if you're Ultramarine, you're still probably going to take Gilliman along and do a little castle. But I mean, hopefully for everyone else, they have a bit more choice.
Absolutely. Joe, what's your feelings?
I'm actually really excited. The thing I like about what Games Workshop have done here, and they've released the codex and 2 mini codexes, but the other supplements are going to be staggered out, is that we're actually in a really interesting time for the game in general, because over the next 2-3 months, whatever it is, these books are coming out, the game is going to change and evolve, and the meta is going to change and evolve as people try and work out all these new combos. And over the next 3-4 weeks of events and stuff, you're going to see so much diversity at all these events because people are trying out all these different things to kind of get the best combos before in 6 months' time when everyone's just running the same Space Marine army because that's what the internet says is the best Space Marine army. I'm actually quite excited for the next few months of just seeing what happens to the game. And obviously there's going to be a lot of Ultramarines and White Scars armies, but then you might see loads of Black Templars and Crimson Fist armies, then it might change to Imperial Fists and Salamanders for whatever reason. But yeah, I'm very excited, and hopefully we'll start seeing pure Space Marine armies winning lots of events.
That would certainly be nice to see. I think my feelings on this is that GW needed to do something to give their poster boys, I said that very weird for some reason, but their poster boys a bit more kind of focus and attention from the gaming community. I think, they need to shake up the game and to add interesting elements that ultimately deliver a more kind of movie marine style presentation for Space Marines, and I think that's what this does very successfully, which is definitely a step in the right direction. In the fullness of time, we'll know just how competitive they are. I imagine there will be some very good builds and some very good options for them, and they're certainly going to, upset things for a good period of time. I think as well there's potentially a lot of tricks, secrets and opportunities with this list that never really ever have been presented to a Space Marine player before. So definitely if you're of a mind that you can conceive and create interesting lists that isn't just sort of following the herd, so to speak, I think this book will definitely offer you a lot of really amazing opportunities, which is no bad thing. And the supplements are cool. I'm not really too bothered about the prices associated with them. They are optional, obviously. By all accounts, that Marine book gives you everything that you need in the initial instance. And I'm very excited to see what White Dwarf has in store when it finally gets around to talking about Primaris Dark Angels, as I understand they may or may not be doing. But yeah, thanks for that, gents. That was a good roundup, all said. I'm going to move us along now to the next segment of the show. Cheers. Woo! Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We are now going to be talking to Phil about his grand tournament, Heat 2, Warhammer 40,000 Army List. How you doing, Phil?
I'm good, thank you.
Enjoying the summer sun of these August months?
I'm really hating it, actually, because it gets too hot in the afternoons, which is my ideal shed painting time when I'm not working. And considering how much I've got to paint with just over a week to go, I could do with every living moment possible to finish it off. So I had, maybe it was like a week or two ago, there was like a whole week where I just did no painting because it was too hot to literally do anything except lounge around the house in my pants.
It is reasonable to say that it does affect the old schedule. I too found myself trying to paint stuff even the other day, and the paint clumps up super quick in these conditions.
Oh yeah, and I've been using a wet palette. So if you're not doing that, you'll really struggle. And even with the wet palette, it was just drying super quickly. And at that point, I was trying to do the flesh tone, like skin color of the Inquisitor that I'm working on, and they're pretty difficult to paint at the best of times. So that was a real nightmare, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. Never ideal. Anyway, I mean, summer sun aside, I mean, you have been... This will actually be the third Grand Tournament Heat that you will be attending in your history. You've been to the 2017, the 2018, and now, obviously, the 2019 Grand Tournament events. So, as a long-standing supporter, almost fan, potentially, of the Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament format... How are you feeling going into the 2019 season? Are you feeling strong, confident, alert, aware?
I sort of feel like I know roughly what I'm getting into. We've done 2 so far, haven't we?
Yeah, this will be the third one.
2 heats, and this will be the third one, yeah. I think the main difference, though, is the change to the Ruins rule. So they're now blocking line of sight as per like the ITC standard. So I know what the train's like normally, and I know sort of how to deal with it. This will be a bit different because it could actually shake up the play of the army list a little bit, and I was tempted to drop in some Colossus Bombards that I've had in a bag for like a year, and I've always been, every time I go to a tournament, I'm like, I really should build these, or before that it was, I really should buy these. And I've still not built them or painted them yet. So I was like, oh, should I quickly sneak some of these in? Because they ignore line of sight. They do 2d6 shots, strength 6, -2, I think flat 2 damage, I believe, or might be d3. I think it's 2. But it ignores cover as well. So really good for shifting units off of objectives that are in terrain, or just units in a ruin, for example, that you can't see. So I think having one of those would be much more beneficial to my list, but I've decided to not go with that because I'm just trying to pick up other stuff instead.
That makes sense. I mean, how do you think, or what has been your objective going into this one? I mean, have you, what's the approach? What's the mindset? What are you hoping to achieve?
Every time I go to it, it's like I'm not really too fussed about qualifying because I've done a final, because I qualified the very first time and I went to the final, and the final was awful. It was a bit of a bloodbath. I won my first game, which was against like 9 Carnifexes, and he had an amazing army, but every other game I lost and got completely smashed. And I was like, the Krieg army is still an index army for the most part. And it really just can't compete on the same level as a standard codex. Now, the very first heat I played in, I jiggled it around slightly, so all the tanks I took as Katchan to get rerolls. Then when I went to the final, I was like, no, I'm going to do pure Krieg, which probably didn't help because I was missing out on the tank benefits, because the Krieg tanks don't really get a benefit, or it's not a very good one.
Yeah.
So this time round, I'm going in really for sort of best army nomination is what I want to aim for. As my if I come at the bottom of the table, but I got a nomination for best army, I'll be super happy, and I can go away from the weekend going, this was all worthwhile. If I can win a couple of games, that would be great. If I can kind of get mid-table, that'd be awesome. I'm not expecting to qualify, because to do that, you need to, I think you're saying earlier, you need to win like 4 games out of your 5, which is a record I've only done once, and that was in a doubles tournament with you. So I don't think that's going to happen in this one whatsoever.
We won all 5, Phil, not even 4, 5.
Well, we did, we won all 5. So if I can win 3 games is sort of my average. So if I can keep up with that, that would be great. If I could get a bunch of favourite game or favourite army votes, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Because that in itself will help me go up the leaderboard a little bit.
Oh, no, massively, man. I mean, if you get 3 wins and you do pretty well from a favourite game, favourite army perspective, then you definitely have the potential to creep into the actual qualifying bracket. I had a look at the Heat 1 scenario, and only, I think, a few of the guys won all 5 games. And obviously they essentially occupied the first, second, third positions. And then obviously everyone who won 4 games also qualified. But there were a good amount of people who qualified with 3 wins, 2 losses, and some very beautiful armies and some very, nice people operating said armies. So I think that's also one of the really interesting things when you look at the mix, because there is actually quite a lot of people who won 3, lost 2, who still managed to, sneak in based on their conduct as a player and also their standard of painting, which is really interesting in terms of what that makes the final become, because there is still potential for people who have a good level of competency with the game but aren't necessarily a hardened tournament player to sneak in there, which I suppose should be there to help balance things out. Although I think, as we saw at the finals earlier this year, I think a lot of the people who kind of existed in that lower bracket probably felt like it wasn't even worth turning up, because they kind of, I imagine, knew from the outset that it was going to be hard work and they weren't really feeling it, or I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Because that was my experience when I did it. And even if I was to qualify this time and go to a final again, I imagine that would still be the general sort of mindset. It would be going in for, well, let's try and do some of the painting awards, because that'll be, for me, easier to achieve in my perception than it would be to try and, place in top half of the final, because that'd be so much harder.
Yeah.
And I think to be able to have a really competitive army and to be really competent at playing it to the point where you could potentially, for example, win a heat or to get in the top 10, but also to have an amazingly well-painted army and also to be a great person, i.e. the package of everything, I think that's actually quite hard to pull off. So I'm picking one of them, which is, let's have a pretty army. Hopefully people like me when they play me, but I tend to get 1 or 2 favourite game votes, which isn't super high, but, you could always get more.
Well, I think, again, you've always got a really nice-looking army, and I think when it comes to certainly, some of the final kind of tallying up of people's gaming experiences, I think again, you can apply a number of potential, scenarios, conundrums, situations to the outcome, but I think, if someone gives you a favourite army vote, are they likely to also give you a favourite game vote as well, or are they thinking, I'll just spread the love and be like, that guy gets favourite game and that guy gets favourite army, and who knows, right? I mean, again, there's a multitude of, very difficult to quantify factors that contribute to those outcomes. But regardless, I think it's actually really interesting having yourself, Tim, on the podcast and contributing, because I always find it actually really interesting, and I think it hopefully is interesting for our listeners to actually hear the perspective of people who aren't just going in it to try and qualify or trying to win, but actually just enjoying a weekend of playing Warhammer 40,000 and getting involved in the broader kind of hobby aspect of it as well. And I think in a way that's what Warhammer World Events is attempting to achieve with the Grand Tournament. It's a celebration of Warhammer 40,000, and I think it's good that it still attracts people like yourself who want to get involved in it, and it's not sort of scared you off, which is nice.
Well, I think every time I come away from it, I'm sort of like, I'm done for the year. No more GTs, never again. Let's do some campaign weekends instead. Come on, guys, and you guys are no. And then by the time it finally comes around again, I'm like, okay, let's give it a go.
It's definitely assisted by all the associated sort of trappings, if you will, or the accoutrements that go along with it, the camaraderie, the going outs in the evenings, all of the... I mean, it is a wonderfully entertaining way to spend in a weekend, so that definitely doesn't hurt.
For sure. I think for me, though, to do a competitive guard army, it's like, first of all, it's hard to do it with Krieg, because they're just an index army, effectively. If I was to do mixed Astra Militarum, it definitely opens up more possibilities. So I could do it, but ultimately to do a competitive guard army, you need to do a horde sort of play style and just have loads of infantry. And I'm getting quicker at that, using larger numbers of infantry. It used to be I would literally do the minimum, like 3 10-man squads. And then loads of tanks just to sort of speed things up. And it's like trying to do 50 to 80 infantry is really strong, but it's like you don't want to get accused of slow play. You sort of want to use movement trays to speed things up, but then at the same time using movement trays restricts your spread on the table. So when you're trying to do ball control or denying deep striking, it's really impractical. And then just also moving that many bodies around, or like taking them off the table because they've been killed, or when you're setting things up, it just slows the game down. So I mean, if I was to do super competitive, it would make almost more sense if I had like a brand new, more elite army, or just whack in a knight or two, for example. So maybe next year, because I think I talked about knights ages ago, going that would be a great addition to my army, but then I'd be distracted by other things. Because sort of my main focus this year has been No Retreat 8 and planning what I'm doing for that, which sort of this tournament ties into, really, because I'm sort of painting a lot of stuff for that, which I sort of want to take to this as well, just to sort of test it out in a way. So if I wanted to go super competitive, like have a knight in there, that would speed things up, but also fill in a lot of holes that my army just wouldn't naturally have.
No, that makes a lot of sense, mate. And I think that's important to acknowledge from the outset that obviously, we all kind of know that No Retreat has definitely been a big focus for you this year. And obviously it's difficult with Krieg for sure to try and maintain that competitive edge. Although I will say, I think you're being incredibly unfair to Krieg. I think the thing is that they've got going for them, as we discovered when we played them in that doubles, was that they're very, very durable. Not having to take morale tests for guard from shooting attacks is a big, big buff, which definitely kind of, holds them in a very, very strong position. And I think that is definitely something to their favour. And I think as well, actually, certainly when you and I were playing together, I never really felt like you were especially slow at playing your army. I think I think a lot of that slowness comes from a general kind of sense of indecision where you're kind of wondering whether it's the right thing to do or not the right thing to do, and having that confidence in the approach. And I think a lot of that can be ironed out with the playtesting that you continue to do. And also I think, again, just kind of even sort of just thinking from the outset what the kind of core strategies are to every single thing that you're taking, and not to abandon those. I think a lot of the times I've seen people lose games, it's because they they doubt themselves, or they doubt what their army's there to do, and they start to kind of compensate for weaknesses that they feel that they all of a sudden have. And that's always where the losses come, is when you start to, shy away from your strategy. I mean, having played in a local tournament only the other day from when we were recording, but 2 weeks ago from this going out into the world, I lost my game 3, and I feel like a lot of that loss was down to the fact that I allowed myself to be, I allowed myself not to kind of stick to my established game plan, and that ultimately led to the defeat. I think if I just stuck to the established plan, I probably would have been all right in that game. But I kind of abandoned that, and that's where it all started to go wrong. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's something that you can work on in between now and then, is just sort of thinking about what these are there to do, what you need them to do, and also just trying not to be precious about it, because I think you may as well. Again, this was something that I became aware of back in 3rd edition of all editions, which was when everyone was trying to solve the Tyranid puzzle in 3rd edition. So in our local stores and local kind of meta, if you will, in 3rd edition, the Tyranids came out, and they were terrifying, because once one Gene Stealer would get into your ranks, or one Gene Stealer would kind of get in, it'd start terrorizing everything. And you always found that people would take their army and then sort of backline it, and then start trying to just sort of get as many turns as they could shooting at them before they got into combat. But that's not what their armies were designed to do, and as such, they struggled because of it. Whereas actually, if you just stuck to your game plan, you actually found that, this actually works a lot better if I actually, do what I'm supposed to do. But anyway, I digress massively. I've got off the point. Should we talk about the list? As I understand it, Phil, there are potentially 2 lists that you want to talk about. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I'll talk about the main one, which is the dream list. If I get everything painted up.
How likely is it that you're going to get everything painted up, Phil, right now?
Well, I've already trimmed it down and lost a couple of units that would be too optimistic to paint up. So I was like, here's what I could do, and I'll go through all the units and stuff first of all, and then I'll talk about the feasibility of it getting painted up. And then I've got a worst case scenario army list where I literally need to paint up like 2 or 3 models, as opposed to maybe like 5 or 6.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So let's hear it. What are we kicking off with? Is it Krieg by any chance, Phil?
It is indeed. It's not Krieg mono faction, and it's not Krieg mono regiment. In fact, which is interesting.
What will Toke say?
Well, I've already been having a bit of a chat with him about it. I think he's disappointed that it's not pure Krieg, but he understands it's a GT. So you got to kind of play the game to an extent. And I've gone a bit competitive, but not all out competitive.
His army list brings a tear to Toke's eye.
I know. So for people that aren't aware of what Krieg's sort of special rules are, how they differ from a standard regiment. They get +1 to their weapon skill, so their weapon skill 3 up in combat, so they're slightly better. They all come armed with crack and frag grenades, and their special rule is that, as Dan said earlier, they don't suffer the morale phase from casualties in shooting, if that makes sense. So if you lose any models from a shooting attack, they don't count towards your morale phase at the very end. However, they're still affected by psychic powers, so anything that does mortal wounds or close combats, which tends to be the devastating bit where they tend to all get wiped out, because that's the thing. Even though they're sort of designed to be good at close combat, they're good at getting into close combat, but not so good when they're actually there, if that makes sense. And they also cost a point extra, so for a 10-man squad, it's 50 points instead of 40 for standard regiment, so they're a little bit more expensive as well. So the first attachment I've got is a battalion. I'm spending 2 CPs and 85 points on the operative requisition sanctioned rule to give myself an assassin, just to have that extra flexibility of what's going to go into that army. Predominantly, it's going to be, if I get them painted, is an Eversaw assassin and I might have gone back on the other one, the sniper one. Basically. Vindicare, that's it. So that's my sort of first spend on CPs. I'm also planning on taking an extra Heirloom of Conquest. So that's another -1 CP to give myself 2 relics, basically. So this is the Krieg detachment. So the first HQ choice is the Death Rider Squadron Commander. So he's a commander officer on horseback, basically. I'm giving him, because I had a few extra points spare in this list, I'm giving him a power sword. So swapping out Hunting Lance for a power sword, but then that's getting upgraded to the relic power sword, which is the Blade of Conquest. So I've used that a few times in the last few games that I've played. It's a bit hit and miss because quite often the Death Riders don't get into combat and they just get shot off the board. But when they do get into combat, it's actually really good because it's like a souped up Hunting Lance, which is +2 to your strength, and it's D3 damage. And the Hunting Lance is -2 AP, but this is -4. Which makes it really good. But the Hunting Lance only works on the turn that you've charged. So I tend to find that the Death Riders do really well on that initial hit when they charge in, but then they kind of get bogged and stuck down into combat for several turns because they can't use the Hunting Lances. So this actually really helps have something that can swing really hard every turn that he's in combat for.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, when we played together in that doubles tournament, we were able to be flexible with which relics we were taking because of the way the tournament pack was worded. So we weren't under an obligation to pick our relic and stick with it throughout the events. So yeah, in the majority of the time, we were taking the relic battle cannon from Vigilus Defiant, which I imagine is going to make an appearance later on in this list, but... yeah, on a few occasions I had said to Phil, in fact, on potentially 2 occasions I had said to Phil, let's not bother taking the relic sword because it's costing us a CP and it never seems to do anything. And inevitably, in one of those 2 games, it would have been the perfect thing to have had in our possession. So I will resign judgment or reassess my assessment of that particular item because... yeah, when we took it away from our army, we really, really needed it. So yeah, I totally get why you were actually keeping it in there because, circumstances permitting, it's very, very good.
Yeah, it also, so one of my models is literally modelled with a power sword because, there was an accident one time and the arm got broken off, but then I swapped it out. But it's also a great way of distinguishing the Death Rider from the regular troops because there is actually no model, so you got to kind of convert it up. And originally I had 10 men, 10 Death Riders that all had Hunting Lances, and whenever I wanted to have a squadron commander, I'd be like, oh, it's that one there, and people would be like, how can I tell the difference? And I'd be like, oh, I'll just separate him out a little bit further away from the rest of them, but it's not particularly obvious. So it's like, to be WYSIWYG, I've got to pay 2 extra points to get a power sword. 4 points because a Hunting Lance is 2, so you take that off, but then you're whacking on 4 for a power sword. But power sword isn't that good because you don't get any plus to your strength. It's just -2, I believe. Whereas this gives you the +2 to your strength, so it's the equivalent and in fact better than a Hunting Lance. So even though it's 1 CP effectively because it's an extra relic, because the relic battle cannon, which I'll talk about later, is by far the default one to take nowadays. So this is an extra nice to have. And for 1 CP, I'm like, it's not too bad.
Are you not in any way interested in taking the Corvus Aquila, though?
Corvus Aquila, I was thinking about it, and I did originally have it in this list, but then I realised a mistake in the list where I had to change some points around and move some bits around, so I dropped it out. If I wanted to take all 3, it would cost me 3 CP, which just feels like too many to take, even though Corvus Aquila is pretty much guaranteed to give you 5 CPs over a course of 5 turns. I mean, it's not necessarily guaranteed, but I think there's a high enough chance that your opponents are going to be spending enough stratagems for you to gain it back. I mean, I could drop it out and just have Korov's Aquila instead and just gain a few extra CPs. But as Richard talked about in his list, having the assassin and the ability for the assassin to regain CPs. So you spend 1, but you can gain 2. So it's like, that's not too bad as a way of gaining some extra CP. And I believe I start on about 7 CP to start off with. I'll tot it up at the end just to make sure. So not a terrible amount.
You should be on... So you'll get... Well, it depends what you're about to say is in the rest of the list, actually.
Well, let's go through the rest of the list.
But yeah, the Corvus Aquila is the one that when your opponent uses a stratagem, you roll a d6, and on a 5-up, you gain a CP. Although you can only gain 1 per battle round, as is the rules.
That's it. So I've then got 2 field officers because they're dirt cheap. So each field officer can give 1 order. You can obviously use a stratagem for a CP that allows them to do 2 orders. One of them's my warlord. They both got hotshot las pistols, and the one that's the warlord also has old grudges. So the tactic there is that he is going to sit in the middle of a tank castle. And old grudges is select 1 unit at the beginning of the game. Everyone within 6 inches of your warlord can re-roll failed wound rolls against that 1 target. So it's a really good way, pretty much turn 1, to guarantee that something's going to die. Because you can basically target all your big guns at that 1 unit just to try and wipe it off the board. So really good against battle cannons, against other tanks and knights, because you're wounding on 4s normally, so the ability to re-roll that is actually pretty decent.
That's solid, man.
So the downside of this list is I don't really have much in the way of orders, because what's really good for infantry is the ability to use move, which allows them to move in advance again. So that's effectively a guaranteed move twice, which is 12 inches, plus 2d6 because you're advancing twice. Around the board in sort of 1 turn, which is really huge. But to do that, you need loads of officers that can follow them around. And having 1 stuck with the tanks means I've only got 1 guy going off doing orders. But what I think I need to do with this is have him babysit the tanks turn 1. Hopefully I've killed that 1 thing that I need with the old grudges, and then he's free to actually kind of chase after the infantry squad and catch up with them. So in future turns, he can hopefully help them sort of jump down the board. And likewise, with the Death Rider commander, he can do the same orders, which is really good on a squad of Death Riders. So they move 10 inches, turn 1. He moves up behind them, and then he can also issue move. So they move another 10 inches, plus, your D6 for your advance roll as well. So that's a really good way of slingshotting your Death Riders down the board. And then that poses a really good imminent threat for your opponent to deal with.
Yeah, I definitely think that is a strong option, if not just because of the fact that you can offer such a tangible threat in the early game. And I think ultimately, the game is won and lost by controlling the objectives. But if you can put a roadblock between you and the rest of your army, or rather between your opponent and the rest of your army, I think that's massively important. And I think, as we kind of discovered when we were running the Death Riders like this, it created such an immediate problem that needed solving, because no one wants to leave that alone, right? When you've got a big unit of cavalry breathing down your neck, you've got to be very tactically sound to be able to maneuver around it, for one, and to also not be in any way intimidated by it. It's weird to kind of apply real-world psychology to small toy soldiers, but it's fair to say that when you throw cavalry at someone, it makes them second-guess their position, because I think, people all of a sudden see this thing in their ranks, and all of a sudden they're like, oh God, what do I actually do about this? And you can just watch their brains trying to kind of process the situation that they're finding themselves in, and it's quite incredible to see witness happening, and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, these guys are rubbish. You could literally just hose them down with, your kind of basic bolter fire or whatever. But the weird thing is that but you've still got to do it, and you've still got to commit to it, and you've got to kill all of them because they ain't running away. I think Death Riders are a bit of a. I think they're a very, very strong unit that when used sacrificially are spectacularly frustrating.
They're a really good distraction unit, distraction carnifex, I guess. And weirdly, I used to run them in my list all the time, but then I basically was like, they just die all the time, and that really frustrated me. But now, like I said, I've sort of embraced that, and I use them almost deliberately to get killed turn 1, turn 2, because that then buys the rest of my army breathing space for that initial turn 1. So in a doubles game, it was fantastic. I used move on a squad of 5, and then I paid 1 CP to do the same order again on another squad, which was a command squad of 4. So that's 9 guys kind of going up, forming a line, and we basically penned in like an entire half of this orc army in their deployment zone. And it's like, so turn 1, they could literally move 3 inches forwards into my guys, and they effectively had to kill them in close combat. And it's like, they killed the majority of those Death Riders, but that was them still in their deployment zone at the end of their turn 1. So it sort of did the job, because it then gave us turn 2 like loads of breathing room. Anyway, I'll carry on with the list.
Sure. I was only going to ask one other thing as well. Because they're cavalry, can Imperial Knights walk over them?
Well,
I don't think they can they?
No, Imperial Knights can only walk over infantry, and that's only when they're falling back from combat.
And that's infantry in swarms, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So in theory, that's another good reason for potentially hemming them in. So I've got, for my troops, I've got 4 bog standard infantry troops, all bare bones, just las guns. That's including the Watchmaster. The Watchmaster is just another word for sergeant. So because the normal sergeant has chainsword and las pistol, I believe, for normal infantry. Then I've got, for elites, I've got my 4-man Death Rider command squad. This gives them the ability to outflank. So they can outflank with several other units of Death Riders, which include my the next option, which is my fast attack slot of 5 Death Riders in 1 squad. So they can outflank along with the command squad and the commander if I want to, which I believe is 6 inches from the table edge. So that's quite good if I need to get into the back line, or if someone had maybe lots of tanks. And I think I could just tie them up by tagging them in close combat. So I might do something like that. But like you said, they've been more effective just actually being on the table, because whenever I do outflank them, they just fail the charge because they've got no ability to re-roll. Mark point, which almost in itself never works. So when I have 3 units, I might, if I'm lucky, get 1 off. I think having them on the table turn 1 just to get shot at is probably more beneficial than having them off the board. Unless there's some really juicy artillery target that they haven't or won't screen against that I can then get to next turn. Because quite often I find I'll be like, oh, I outflank these, and then they put so much pressure on my board edge, I'm actually just outflanking pretty much into my own deployment zone as a counter punch to their attack. And it's like I could have just had them on the table doing stuff from turn 1.
But again, like you said, if there is a situation where you've got an artillery piece hanging out in, behind ruins that you can't target, having a unit of Death Riders or multiple units of Death Riders appearing and charging them is very useful. Assuming obviously that you successfully roll the charge and all the variables.
And obviously lots of stuff could now be inside a ruin that I can't physically get through into a wall, for example.
Well, the way the ruin rules work is if they're within 1 inch of the edge of the ruin, so if they're within 1 inch of the wall, you can still declare the charge against them.
No, that's true. But quite often people are just on the second floor, so I can't reach them. One of my other favourite tactics is to take the dagger of Tashak, I think it's called, where you can outflank a regular squad.
Yeah.
Because then I can take engineers or grenadier squads. And grenadiers have hotshot las guns, which is -2 AP, so they're really good at just coming on the board and shooting someone off. Although for them it's a bit annoying because they're not within rapid fire, because rapid fire range is 9 inches and they're just outside of 9. Whereas the engineers do 2 shots with their shotguns at 12 inches. So, they're pretty good sometimes just coming in and clearing something off of the unit.
Yeah.
But again, that's like that would be something I would use, but it's like that requires an officer, which I'm very sort of low on the ground on. It requires a relic, which I've sort of got plenty of choices for relics. And it also requires an elite squad, which I sort of don't really have the points because I'm trying to pack in so much.
Yeah, no, of course.
Now, the last thing I've got in this detachment is a non-Krieg unit, which is an astropath. But because he is a sort of auxiliary unit, I can take him sort of within the build because he's not a regiment-specific unit. And I'm just taking him for the Night Shroud psychic power, so he can give something -1 to hit, which is going to be for one of my big tanks that I can get to next.
Cool.
So for 26 points, he's not too bad, just as a sort of buffing unit to try and make my tanks a bit more survivable. So next up is a Supreme Command attachment, and this was all your idea, basically, to take a kind of super cheesy selection of tanks. So for my 3 HQs, I'm Supreme Command, I've got 3 tank commanders, and these aren't going to be Death Corps of Krieg, they're going to be a different regiment, so they actually get a decent bonus. I'm thinking at the moment Valhallan, because it just makes them more survivable. Well, not necessarily more survivable, but just makes them more efficient when they're dropping down in profile. So for a standard Lehman Russ, you've got to be down to 3 hit points to be on your 3 hit points keeps you on 6. So I think that's the lowest profile. Or maybe you need to be 4. So if you've got 4 hit points, you're still shooting at top efficiency instead of 6.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's... No, maybe it's 3. I don't know. Anyway, 3 or 4.
Either way, it takes a lot of punishment before it gets rubbish.
Yeah, basically. So the first one is a standard tank commander with a battle cannon and a las cannon. Then the next one has the Punisher Gatling cannon, a heavy bolter on the front, and a plasma cannons on the sponsons, plus a heavy stubber. So this is my sort of main anti-infantry tank. But the plasma cannons just give you that extra bit of flexibility in terms of dealing with either heavy infantry like Space Marines or stripping some points off of the tank if I really need to. And then I've got another one which is a las cannon and a battle cannon, but this time this one's being upgraded to the relic battle cannon, which is the Hammer of Sunderance, which does the flat 3 damage.
So that's another 1 CP to get that, isn't it? Because you've got to take the detachment.
Yes, so the Emperor's Fist Tank Company cost me 1 CP. But that gives me 2 las cannons, 2 battle cannons, and 2 plasma sponsons in terms of like sort of decent anti-tank firepower.
Wasn't there a las cannon on the Punisher, or is that heavy bolter, is it?
No, I went for the heavy bolter because it's a bit cheaper, and chances are he's going to be... Well, there's a bit of a at odds here. So the Punisher tends to need to be moving forwards to be in range of something, or at least turn 1. But actually, you don't really want to be moving him because then your sponson battle cannons are -1 to hit, which also means you're more likely to overcharge. If you do overcharge, do damage to yourself, because you'll then be damaging yourself on 2s rather than 1s. So I'm thinking maybe turn 1, I'll move him forwards, and then from then on, I won't be moving him. But again, with the las cannon, if you did have it, it's a lot of points if you're going to be at -1 to hit with it. So I thought for that one, I'd go for the heavy bolter. Also gives me some extra anti-infantry firepower, Because as good as the Punisher is, the fact that it doesn't have any AP can make it problematic. So if you're up against Space Marines, having a heavy bolter, I mean, it's only a few shots, but the AP really helps, I find.
No, it makes a lot of sense, mate.
So for 1 CP, there is a stratagem where you can move and advance your tank and still fire your main turret weapon twice, so you can still get the grinding advance rule. So maybe that will be quite a good tactic for the Punisher tank. So turn 1, either hang it back so it's out of range from stuff that might be able to damage it, but then I can actually move it that full 10 inches forwards, plus I can advance if I want to be able to fire the battle cannon twice. If I advance, I can't fire the other weapons. Yeah. But they specifically FAQ'd it to say you can still use grinding advance even if you advance with that stratagem. But the stratagem costs 1 CP, so it might be a good option. I think
pretty good value.
The flexibility is there, because quite often turn 1, sometimes you're like, oh geez, I'm out of range of everything, because you sometimes want to move that 5 inches and then you're not in range, or you've just got to go, I move 10, but then I can only shoot once, which isn't ideal.
No, absolutely. No, I think that sounds like a perfectly reasonable approach, and I think the option of using the Vestroyans, was it Vestroyans? Valhallans? Which one are you
Valhallans, double room characteristics. We've been talking about it all week, basically, in terms of should I go for
We'll still be talking about it up until the day before, I imagine.
I think so, and it's something I'm going to play test. And the reason why it's so difficult to work out is the next choice, which is a Lord of War, which is a Shadow Sword. Now, I took the Shadow Sword to the very first GT that I did, which is where I managed to qualify. And then the last time I took the Baneblade, because actually I think the Baneblade's a bit more of an all-rounder. Like, it does, I think it's 2d6 or 3d6 for the main battle cannon, but it does flat 3 damage. So it's actually, it can be really good at taking out things like knights and vehicles. But it's also still pretty decent at dealing with Horde. But for this time, I was like, I'm assuming there's going to be a bit more of a knight-heavy meta because of the Chaos Knight. So I was like, I'll go back to the Shadow Sword. And this is where I get the interesting debate around the regimental options. Because it's a Supreme Command, my Lord of War now gets a regimental trait. So it's like, which one benefits the Shadow Sword the most? Versus which one benefits the Leman Russes. Because if it was arguably just the Leman Russes, I'd be like, let's go Cadian, because you get reroll 1s if you don't move, and you can do a tank order on itself to reroll the number of shots, which makes it an equivalent of the Catachan one. But that only affects the Leman Russes. The Shadow Sword not moving, probably not a problem, so getting to reroll 1s is kind of good. But it can't reroll the number of shots or anything else. Yeah. And a lot of problems I've had in the past is I found the Shadow Sword either gets taken out turn 1, or it gets taken out to the point where it's degraded at least 1, if not 2 profiles. And at that point, you're hitting on 6s, or if you're trying to target some flyers, you're hitting on 7s or 8s even in some instances. So it's just impossible, which is why I was thinking comboing it with Valhallan means if it survives turn 1, it's going to still, chances are it's going to be able to shoot on its like kind of top tier profile still. My original strategy was to combo it with a Tech Priest instead of an Astropath, because I can heal D3 wounds in my turn, which would chances are bump it up to a profile if I was down on, for example, the very lowest, if I only had like 3 hit points left. Chances are I could heal it up enough that I would then be able to get it up to the next profile, or to the top profile, in fact. So at least gets 1 or 2 turns putting out some serious hurt. But then I've sort of changed my mind and gone, I'll go for the Astropath for the -1 to hit, which I'll always put on the Shadow Sword, which will hopefully give that the more survivability than just healing 3 wounds.
That makes a lot of sense, mate. I think, again, there's a lot of good options there, and all of them are better than you get +1 armor save for anything with strength 4 or lower shooting at you, right?
Yeah, so that's the Mars Alpha pattern rule for the Krieg Leman Russes. So the Death Riders have a similar rule called augmented mounts. So if they get hit with something strength 4 or less, they get a 5-up invuln save, which is arguably more useful. Whereas with the Leman Russes, it's a bit of a moot point. I think in the 3 years I've been playing it now in 8th edition, I've used that rule a handful of times, like less than 10 for sure, probably less than 2, because the amount of times people are going to shoot bolters or las guns at a Leman Russ tank is so slim, like it never happens. People always have anti-tank, they're always going to find anti-tank weapons, so it's completely pointless. Which is the whole reason about, to go for a different regimental tactic in the first place.
That makes sense, man. So what's the final detachment that rounds out this list of yours?
So this is a Vanguard detachment, so another CP if you're keeping count. And this is my sort of showcase selection of all the kind of converted models that I've been working on this year, along with stuff I'm currently trying to paint up. So it's Inquisitor Eisenhorn, although it's my female Inquisitor, if you've been watching on Instagram. Inquisitor Lady Greyhorn. So she's a completely converted model, but I'm running her and I modelled her to look like Eisenhorn, basically, in terms of the weapon and war gear loadout. So I'll run you through his stats because probably no one knows what he does.
Or what she does, potentially, now.
Well, exactly. So movement 6 to be expected, weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, strength and toughness of 3, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 10, and a 4-up save. They've got an artificer bolt pistol, which is range 12, pistol 1, strength 4, -1, 2 damage.
Nice.
Barbara Sator, which is Eisenhorn's famous sword. So strength user, AP -3, D3 damage, but you get to add 1 to your hit rolls for this weapon. So you'll be hitting 2s, which isn't too bad with your 4 attacks.
Yep.
They then have a Ruin Staff, which is +3 strength, -1 AP, and D3 damage. So I guess that's what you really want to be using if you up against something a bit tougher. And lastly, they've got Electrobane grenades. So 6-inch range, grenade 1, strength 4, -1 AP, 1 damage. But if the target is a vehicle keyword that is, and you roll to wound on a 4-up, this weapon makes the target suffer 1 wound in addition to the normal damage. Or if you roll a 6, it's D3 mortal wounds. So something to deal with vehicles in there, which is sort of nice, but not essential. That's not why I'm taking it.
It's good to have options, though, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. And then he's got a bunch of abilities. So he's got Quarry, which isn't in this book. I believe Quarry allows you to pick a type of ordo that you're in. Quarry. So he is Xenos.
Yep.
By default. So I can reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1 for Ordos Xenos units that targets that don't have Chaos, Imperium, or unaligned keywords. So it should be anything else, basically.
Nice.
Xenos units, basically. So the ability to reroll 1s to hit and to wound is pretty good.
Yeah, no, solid.
And authority of the Inquisition allows you to give your leadership to anyone, I think, within 6 inches. So sort of useful, but as I said before, don't really need it for my guys in terms of shooting casualties. But if he's getting, because he's sort of like a little beat stick character, like a decent close combat unit. Not amazing, but not too bad either. So he can sort of go with my infantry just to lend them a bit of close combat ability. So, maybe that will become more useful later on.
Yeah.
Actually, no, Authority of the Inquisition, I'm lying. That's the ability to go in any transport. Because the next rule is the one I'm talking about, which is Unquestionable Wisdom. All friendly Imperium units within 6 inches may use his leadership instead of their own.
Mm-hmm.
He's also got No Stranger to Pain, which gives you a 6-up Feel No Pain, basically.
Nice.
Then he's got some of the more. This is the more interesting one. This is the Malleus Codicium, which is his kind of heretical book that he has.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main feature of his whole novel series. So once per battle, at the start of any turn, Inquisitor Eisenhorn may use the Malleus Codicium. If he does so, he loses the Unquestionable Wisdom ability, which is the leadership one, for the remainder of the battle, because he goes a bit nasty, basically. He turns to the dark side. But you can immediately set up a Demon Host model anywhere on the battlefield that is within 6 inches of Eisenhorn and more than 1 inch away from enemy models. Nice. The Demon Host then gains the character keyword, and its strength, toughness, wounds, and attacks characteristics are all increased by 2. So it sort of is a supercharged Demon Host to represent Cherubiel, which is the Demon Host that he has in the books. Furthermore, whilst the Demon Host remains within 6 inches of the Inquisitor, Eisenhorn add 1 to hit rolls, wound rolls, and invulnerable saving throws made for it. If Eisenhorn is slain, the Demon Host is removed as a casualty as well. And then it just says if you're playing a match play game, you've got to pay the reinforcement points. So I'll go through the Demon Host abilities in a second.
Sure.
And then the one extra thing that he gets, which is sort of one of the other reasons why I wanted to take him, is he can manifest 2 psychic powers in each psychic phase and deny 2. He also knows Smite and 2 powers from the Telepathica discipline.
Nice.
So the 2 that I think I was most likely to go for, there's only 3, so I'll quickly read through them. There's Terrify, which is a warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select a visible enemy unit within 18 inches. Until the start of your next leadership phase, that unit must subtract 1 from its leadership, and it can't fire Overwatch. So, the ability to deny Overwatch on something might be quite useful.
Very useful.
Especially if I could combo it with my Death Riders, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a useful one. Then there's Mental Fortitude, warp charge value of 4. If manifested, select a visible Imperium unit within 18 inches of the Psyker. Until the start of the next psychic phase, that unit automatically passes morale test. So that one's junk, basically. I don't think I need that one.
Forget about that one. No one needs to remember that.
And then this is the one I'm taking him for, basically. So Dominate, as a warp charge value of 7. If manifested, select an enemy character within 18 inches of the Psyker. Remember that most knights tend to be characters, which makes it quite interesting. You may force the model to immediately shoot a single weapon or make a single close combat attack at an enemy unit of your choice, as if it were part of your army. Models cannot attack themselves, but they can attack other members of their own unit. So the ability to kind of get within 18 inches of a knight and potentially make it, shoot its main gun, or to overcharge a gun at a target, I think it's actually quite useful.
It's incredible. I think as well, did they clarify that if you took control of a model that has a plasma pistol, you can overheat it and potentially murder them with it?
Yeah, so there's no FAQ for this one, but they do talk about that in the main FAQ, I believe, because there's a Gene Stealer cult or a Tyranid, I think it's the Broodlord, has an ability where he can do that same thing. And they do say, if you want, you can overcharge it to try and kill off that model.
Amazing. That's really cool.
So it could be quite good. So it's like, you've got Azrael there. Let's overcharge that pistol and see what we get.
Well, Azrael re-rolls his misses, though, so you'd have to be really, really unlucky, which I have been on a couple of occasions.
Does he have to, or can you choose to?
Look at you. Can you re-roll a successful roll? Just be like, just re-roll it.
That would be interesting.
Be
so those are his powers. General consensus from what I read online is he's not bad, but he's not great for his points. Most people tend to talk about Greyfax as the best Inquisitor because she's got some really good anti-psychic ability. But the fact that he gets 2 psychic powers and can deny 2, that's 2 more denies than I've ever been able to have ever in any game I've played. So the ability to deny some psychic is a nice little buff for my army that I don't normally get. I'll then read through the demon host abilities.
Well, I was just going to say on the topic of Eisenhorn, I think I agree with people's consensus that he's probably not as good as he could be for his points, but then at the same time, he opens up a lot of flexibility and ultimately delivers something different to your army list, especially with the combination with the demon host, which we're going to talk about now then.
So the demon host has a movement of 6, a weapon skill of 3, and a weapon skill of 4, and a ballistic skill of 4. But remember, if I'm within 6 inches of Eisenhorn, I get to add +1 to my hit rolls, so I make him hit on a 3-up. And then I'll be able to get +1 to my wound rolls as well. So strength 4, toughness 4, 3 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 7, and a 7-up save. And then he's got 2 weapons, which is Unholy Gaze, which is a range of 12 inches, assault 1, strength 8, -1 AP, 1 damage. Each time you make a wound roll of 6+ for this weapon, the hit resolves at damage 3 instead.
Nice.
And then Warp Grasp, which is a melee weapon, strength user, which is 4, AP -3, 1 damage. And then the interesting stuff is his special powers. So the demonic power is roll a d6 for this model at the start of a movement phase and look up the result and roll on the following table. So a 1 to 2 is demonic speed. This model has a movement of 12 inches and may fly for the rest of the movement phase. 3 to 4 is reknit host form. Remove any wounds suffered by this model earlier in the battle, which could be quite handy if you rolled for that quite consistent. And then 5 to 6 is the interesting one. Energy Torrent. Roll a d6 for each enemy unit within 3 inches of this model. On a 2-up, that enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. So that one could be quite good.
That would be very useful, yeah.
And then lastly, it's got the demonic ability, which gives it a 5-up invulnerable save. So it sort of looks a bit rubbish to start off with, but then you realise its strength and toughness, wounds and attacks are all increased by 2. So strength and toughness are both 6. Wounds become 5. And then the attacks, instead of it being 2, become 4. So, it then becomes a bit more tasty in terms of what it can do. I mean, it's not like super OP or anything like that, but it gives me a bit of ability to potentially go up and, deal some damage to something, or the fact that I could suddenly have a 12-inch movement and be able to fly gives me some ability to deal with some other, units I might not normally be able to, or to go and grab an objective, for example.
Yeah. That's definitely a good option. I think, again, in terms of what you've been doing for it from a actual kind of modelling perspective, it looks absolutely fantastic. And you've checked in with the events team, haven't you, about the legality, the tournament regulations?
Yeah,
and all the rest of it?
I've shown them images of both my Greyhorn character, who's going to be my Eisenhorn. I noticed similarities in the names, Teehee. So I showed them the Greyhorn model plus Esosas, who's the name of my demon host, and they're perfectly fine with them. So I was most concerned about the larger base for the demon host, purely because it has an ability which is anything within 3 inches of this model can suffer on a 2-up, suffer DP mortal wounds.
Yeah.
And it's like the original demon host was on I think a 28mm base.
Yeah.
And it's like, realistically, if they ever made that again, it would be on a much larger base. And it's like, my one is I think on a 56mm. It's not the absolutely massive one that your Rain came with. I think it's much like a Dreadnought sized one instead. So it's still a lot bigger, but it fits. It's basically ruled of cool. It looks so much better. If it was to be on anything smaller, it would look a bit dinky and piddly. If someone was really like, you can't do this, I'd be like, whatever. Like, if you want to measure 3 inches from, pretending it was a 28mm base, do it. Like, if it's going to bother someone that much, I don't mind playing it that way, because then it's within the spirit of the game within the legal terms of base sizes, I guess.
Yeah.
But basically, Games Workshop, like in terms of the events team, have said it's totally fine. So I'm just going to play it that way.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would really have a problem with it. It's not a super OP unit. It's not getting any kind of crazy buffs in terms of, it's not like it's projecting an aura ability that I've then put on a massive base for reason or anything. And then lastly, so to round out that Vanguard detachment, I've just got 2 individual models, both for their own units, because I've got to fill out the elites. So I've got 2 acolytes. Acolytes are 10 points each, well, 8 points each plus. I spent a couple of points on some weapons, and they're basically real junk units. But they get the authority of the Inquisition and the Quarry special rule again. They're also loyal servants. So roll a d6 each time you're friendly. Inquisitor loses a wound whilst they're within 3 inches of this unit. On a 2-up, the unit can intercept the hits. The character does not lose a wound, but the acolyte suffers a mortal wound. I assume this is done. It's not like the Tau drone special rule. This is done in the damage phase. So
Read
it's not
the rule out loud one more time.
So roll a d6 each time a friendly Ordo Inquisitor loses a wound whilst they're within 3 inches of this unit.
Yeah, so that's not the same as the Tau thing. Yeah. The Tau thing is before the wound is allocated, essentially, and then turns into damage, which is why they can take a las cannon hit and turn it into 1 mortal wound, which is oh so fun.
Yeah. So that's an interesting ability. So it does effectively give me 2 extra wounds on my Inquisitor for a lovely price of like 22 points. It seems a bit crazy. So each one is just armed with a chainsword, and then I upgraded the las pistol to a needle pistol, so I can wound models on a 2, which is, not too bad, especially if I'm against some Xenos units, because I'll then get to reroll the 1. But it's obviously, no AP and just 1 damage, but a nice little touch, I thought, for those guys.
Rounds out the points, I imagine, as well.
So for this one, actually, I'm at 1749, so I've got 1 point to spare, and everything else costs two points, basically, if I wanted like some stubbers or something. So there's no way to get it bang on for money, which I know.
Put a bolt pistol on one of those field commanders.
But they're modelled with las pistols, that's the thing.
It's true. It's true. I'd
so
still do it on Battlescribe. I'd still put it on there and just have it so as the numbers look right. Otherwise it would bug me too much.
Fair enough. So the Inquisitor detachment is like my would like to have detachment. It's something I'm still currently painting up. I pretty much painted up Lady Greyhorn, my Inquisitor. Yep. I've done a lot of work on the Demon Host. He's basically tabletop standard in terms of the model, but I've still got to do the basing, and it's quite a detailed base, so I've got a fair bit of work to do with that. Yeah. And then I've got 2 acolytes to paint up, which I've still got to do. So that's basically the 2 things I need to paint up, plus the Astropath. So for the Astropath, I'm going to use my Quartermaster Medicae models, which is 90% painted.
Yep.
And there's pretty much tabletop already. I just need to base it, basically. So I've basically got 2 models and lots of basing to do. Oh, plus the assassins as well.
Yeah.
So that's still quite a bit to do with like a week and a half to go.
Yeah.
Actually, a week and 2 days. So it could be done. A worst case scenario, though, I'm going to drop the Inquisitorial units, which will be a shame because I think they will be visually stunning. I think people will enjoy seeing them, and they're the things I can actually enter into painting competitions and on the weekend, which I enjoy doing. Normally, I just get to enter in a tank because I've got a really nicely painted tank. But now I finally have a lovely character model to go into the hero competition, or a monster to go into. Well, annoyingly, the monster one also goes into the vehicle category now, I believe. But I'll put my demon host into that because that will look so much better than the tank, for example.
Yeah. Beefed up Yvraine as it is, or not Yvraine, sorry. Yvraine is the Eisenhorn, and the Incarn is the demon. It's quite a beautiful bit of pseudo elder nonsense getting into your army list, Phil.
Yes, especially when they're all Ordo Xenos. It's like it's been planned all along.
There you go.
But there'd just be a really good visual centre point for my army, which I think, potentially will help me either win some favourite army votes or maybe go for that best army nomination, which is ultimately what I'd really like to aim for. So it'd be a shame to not do it, but by not having them in there is like my army is distinctly less competitive than it could be if I was to take them out.
Yeah. So at the start you talked about the second option. So, I mean, accepting that we've probably talked a lot about the first option, can we rattle through what would change in a worst case scenario, I suppose?
Yes, so worst case scenario is very similar. So there's a battalion with a Death Rider commander, no relic sword or power sword, he's just got a hunting lance because I'm saving on points. I've got a field officer with old grudges, same as before, but this time I've got a field marshal as well. So he does 2 orders instead of one.
Venner? No Venner?
Well, no, because Venner is more expensive than the 2 officers combined, and he only does 3 orders, I believe, whereas the 2 of them combined also do 3 orders. And it gives me the flexibility of 1 field officer to hang back with the tanks for the old grudges special rule for 1 turn. Then for troops, I've got 5 10-man infantry squads. So I've got a lot more board presence with this one. Then I've got my Death Rider command squad and the Death Rider squadron. So that's all the same. Then I've also got a Hellhound. And the Hellhound's got a heavy flame on the front, as well as the Inferno cannon, and then I give it tracked guards because that's where you have to play them. Tracked guards mean you always your movement value doesn't degrade regardless of your whatever wounds you're on. So I'll always be moving 12 inches with my Hellhound, and obviously I always auto hit with the flamers. So even up until it's dead, it's still sort of zipping around doing what it needs to do, which is always good.
Awesome. The Emperor's work.
Yes, and obviously I've got my operative requisition sanctioned in there as well for my assassin. Then I've got the similar Supreme Command attachment. This time I was thinking I'll just go Cadian, just for a bit of difference, although if I playtest it I might change it. So 1 tank commander with battle cannon and las cannon, same as before. Another tank commander with the battle cannon with the Hammer of Sunderance relic battle cannon plus a las cannon, same as before. Then it's literally the same as before, actually. It's a tank commander with heavy bolter at the front, plasma cannons, and a Gatling cannon. I think this time I've just dropped out the heavy stubber on top, I believe.
No Pask. No Pask.
Well, I would, but I just don't have the points because I then also, once again, got the Shadow Sword in there. And then that's it. That is 1,750. So I basically dropped the Inquisition for 2 more infantry squads plus the Hellhound, which I think probably gives you more valuable firepower than what you get out of the Inquisition. It's just not as nice a unit. I mean, I've also lost for Astropath as well because that's another thing to paint. So, ideally, I still sort of like the idea of a Tech Priest, but the previous times when I played it, the Tech Priest has been a bit useless because normally the thing's pretty much dead.
Yeah.
And it's very rare when you go up a profile level. However, I think I still generally think the combo of that and Valhallan would be really strong because it can do D3 mortal wound, repair D3 wounds, plus you can use Jory rigging stratagem to regain 1 wound. So that's potentially 4. Now, when you only need to be on 3 wounds on your Leman Russ to be on your top profile, that's like a good combo. Now, I think for the Shadow Sword, you need to be on 6 or 7. I think it's 7 wounds to be on your top profile, but that's still not too bad. Like, it depends if it'll be a grey area as to whether it'll be in that perfect level where you actually need it to be, basically.
No, that makes a lot of sense, mate. I'm slightly saddened that you didn't turn around and express an interest in the worms. Oh,
In the
how I
worms.
tried to sell you on the virtue of the worms.
No, I know. And should we explain the worms for anyone who hasn't? Have you talked about the worms before? I'm sure
We
you
have
might.
mentioned the worms on a few occasions. The worms are a recurring conversation, but they are specifically the worms that accompany
Blackstone Fortress.
the Blackstone Fortress, Amble expansion. You get the bone worm infestation tokens or figures, which are essentially a 12-point worm that can burrow underground and appear anywhere on the board as long as it's outside of 9 inches in the corresponding turn. Which I was trying to sell Phil on the virtues of, because one, he could use it to fill out a Vanguard detachment, giving him 1 extra CP, and two, it's almost a guaranteed line breaker every game. Woo! But
Yeah, I think the chances of winning a game from that one VP is pretty slim now. The missions have reoccurring, like scoring objectives every turn.
just you wait,
How-
Phil. Just you wait.
If I lose by not having it, I will let you know. I think the one benefit though is if you're going for a qualification score, then getting all your secondaries is really important. So I think it would be really good if I was going super competitive. However, I don't think I'm going to get close to qualifying, so I'm not too worried about the secondaries. Although the secondaries you can see it, like especially around the mid-table, those secondaries can make you go, 5 to 10 places up the table.
Yeah.
So it does make a difference getting all of them.
No,
Is it still in order of priority? So is it, for example, like Slay the Warlord, then First Blood, and then, or do they all get scored together?
I think the order of service is Slay the Warlord, First Strike, and then Linebreaker, because I think they've kind of rated it in terms of what's hardest to achieve, and broadly, the Linebreaker secondary is considered one of the easier things to get. So, yeah, who knows? But I think, anyway, I should just put the worms in my army. But we'll talk about that another time. Because at the point of this going out, it's the day where we will be at Warhammer World playing in Grand Tournament Heat 2. And based on this series of things, there's going to be so much, or there will have already been so much of us talking about new Space Marines that we figured, rather than trying to squeeze my army list into this conversation, we'll do that as part of a kind of roundup piece to try and talk about overall tournament experience and things of that nature. So next episode we'll be talking about what I took to the Grand Tournament Heat 2 and how I performed within it, and whether or not I can be all smug and clever, or whether I have to go, yeah, that didn't work out, but here's what I took anyway, and here was the logic, and this is how it went. So yeah, we'll see how that all kind of comes together. But I reckon that pretty much rounds up this section. Thank you very much, Phil, for taking the time to talk us through
That's
it all.
okay.
It's always a pleasure hearing about the ongoing struggles of the Krieg.
Or the struggles of the painting,
Well, that's it, mate.
as it
That's
is
it.
at the moment.
Tell me about it. I mean, as I say, right now I'm sat here looking at a multitude of unpainted things that still need to happen between now and when this is being broadcast for the first time ever. So between editing, producing, delivering this podcast and painting an army, I'm going to be pretty warhammered out by the time we get the other side of this grand tournament. But very, very excited all the same. I'm hopeful. I'm going for the double, Phil. 2 Grand Tournament Heat victories. That's what I'm going to get.
That'll be quite impressive to do. I mean, I think you said before, it's a combination of skill, but also a little bit of luck in terms of not only your matchups, but just getting those like favorite player votes, or for example, best army votes to pip your other opponents to the post. But if you can do it, it'll be pretty impressive, and that'll be an accolade in itself. Probably
Well, exactly.
more impressive than winning a GT, maybe.
Well, exactly. I'm going to do it for the good of the podcast, Phil.
Oh, that's true. So you can do a podcast episode on how to win a GT.
I can, yeah, absolutely. I can post it up there with glee and talk about how brilliant I am, which is I guess what I do all the time anyway, as many people have pointed out to me in the comments on multiple multiple occasions. Yes, that's right. I am really that smug. Yay. Anyway, that was that. Thanks very much, Phil. Let's transition now to whatever comes next. And it is with that we conclude episode 27 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. An epic podcast, if not a little bit kind of efficient. We didn't really necessarily know as much as we probably should have done about Space Marines, but I think we fluffed it along relatively well. Wouldn't you agree, guys?
Oh, definitely. At the end of the day, everyone's going to be reviewing that book and has reviewed that book to death. So we didn't want to give you more of the same.
Exactly. And hopefully that's what we achieved. But yeah, so that was that. And then obviously good roundup on Phil's army list. Very excited to see how that performs alongside the rest of us. Hopefully while you're listening to this, we're all, into the progress on our Grand Tournament Heat 2. Please check out our Instagram because we will be posting regular updates on all of our progress throughout Grand Tournament Heat 2. So that's a really great place if you would like to track our progress at this seminal event that we are attending. We'll let you know if any of us are randomly going to appear on any live streams or things of that nature. There are enough of us in attendance this time around, so you never know. We could be there. I mean, that'd be nice for you, wouldn't it, Joe, to continue in your, live stream online gaming performance?
That's the next step, isn't it, in the evolution of what we're going through and what I'm doing. Just to get my face on the internet. It's all about the Warhammer dice. I'm gonna pilfer me some of those lovely red dice.
That's it, mate. That's it. I mean, Phil, would you be up for some live streaming if it came your way?
Oh, I'd be tempted to, although I haven't actually played with the current army build that I'm working on, so I'd probably be a bit nervous. Although come Friday, once me and Joe have had a few practice games, maybe I'll be a bit more confident about it. I like the idea of doing it, but I'd also be massively worried I'll balls up on camera and the internet will shout at me.
That is true.
Hilarious. Everyone I know personally who's played on the live stream has lost.
Right.
I did.
I can do that quite easily.
I did post a loss when I went on the live stream at Grand Tournament Heat 1 in 2017. That was game 4. So first game on the Sunday. I played against Mikey from Hellstorm Wargaming. I've told this story many, many times. Essentially, he seized the initiative on me. Had he not seized the initiative on me, it would have been a very different sort of game. But, how many other people have you heard make those claims on multiple occasions? I can't say for certain I would have beaten him had I gone first. But, again, I probably would have stood a much greater chance than I ended up having in the end. But regardless, it was, it was a great experience. I recommend it to anyone. I think, again, they've done a much better job on their live streams of actually having tables that are similar to the rest of the event, because one of the things that was complained about in GT Heat 3 was that the table that they were using on the live stream was way different from the ones everyone else was using, and the level of terrain and the layout of the table was so dramatically different from what everyone else got to experience. It actually did have a impact on outcomes of people's games that was a little bit annoying for some.
Well, they used one of their, the Warhammer World display tables, didn't they? It was like one of the ones where everything's glued down.
Yep.
There's like massive buildings. I quite enjoy the ones where they just cover the entire thing in crates and containers.
Yeah, you're a big fan of the crates, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh, I just love them.
I love a crate for
So,
you.
it's like Shipment from Call of Duty back in the day.
Well, indeed. So yeah, anyway, like I said, please check us out on Instagram. I mean, again, it's not really, a podcast if you're not pleading for people to follow you on social media, but I think if any of you are interested in seeing how we're getting on, that's where you'll find that information. Beyond that, this has been episode 27 like and subscribe. I feel only the smallest sense of personal loathing as I say those words out loud. But nonetheless, yeah, thank you very much for all the ongoing support, guys. We genuinely really appreciate it. And it's been really cool, actually, the level of interaction that we've been witnessing with our, collaborated, extra push on the old social medias, which has been super cool to see that people are digging what we're doing, which is very nice. And, yeah, I mean... Joe, how do you feel about the love and support of our glorious people?
Oh, it's really good. It's really nice. Everyone's really polite. Everyone's given a positive output. Normally, sometimes you get the old negative Nancy's, but I think it's all good. Everyone's nice, and I quite like to meet some of the people that listen to our stuff because they say they're a fan, but they could be robots. I'd like to see them in the flesh.
Exactly. You want them to come up and to touch you.
Yeah, and I want them to surround me so I can do that weird kind of like manga-esque, like schoolgirl, massive eye sparkly look as they all surround me and mob me, and then eventually tear my skin off and wear it as a suit.
There you go. So that's what you want to happen to you.
Yeah.
I mean, Phil, do you share his aspirations? Are you looking forward to people ripping your skin off and wearing it as a suit?
No, I think I can pass on that one quite comfortably.
There you go.
Without becoming more than a PG-13, have you ever seen the film Perfume?
No, I've never seen the film Perfume.
Go away and watch the last 10 minutes of that. It's a weird film, and it ends up where there's a bunch of people having happy times, and then they all rip their skin off.
Isn't there spoilers?
It does sound an awful lot like spoilers.
Go watch this movie, and I'm literally going to just tell you what happens right at the very end.
Yeah, well, the problem is you've had 15 years to watch it, so the spoilers time is gone. Alright? I
mean, so you saying, I didn't even know this movie existed until you just brought it to my attention.
Oh. But you don't know why. You want to go through the magical story and the knowledge of why it ends up in skin removal.
Yeah, it's true. I assume it was itchy.
Yes. They all have itching powder.
That's it. And that is the net result of, carelessly applying itching powder.
Yep. They're all allergic to the fairy conditioner, or whatever it is they put on their clothes.
There you go. Well, fantastic. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.